What would drive a man to trudge through mud, filth, and fear, only to worship at the altar of uncertainty? The medieval pilgrim faced a gauntlet of horrors, a chaotic tapestry of flesh and faith stained with the blood of betrayal. Why would anyone willingly become a walking target for disease, banditry, and the whims of fate? The answer lies in the shadows, buried beneath layers of history that would make even the most hardened soul shudder. Picture a ragtag band of hopefuls, their faces gaunt with desperation, clutching rusted relics and tattered maps, each one seeking redemption in a world where death lurked at every corner. These were not just pilgrims, they were actors in a tragic play that promised salvation but delivered madness. Want a front row seat to the gruesome spectacle? You'll need to brave the roads fraught with peril, where every step echoes with the cries of the lost. Drenched in sweat and superstition, they marched onward, but not without a gnawing question: how long before hunger and despair turn a believer into a beast? Crammed together like sardines in a barrel, they had one thing in common: an insatiable urge to gamble their lives on a mystery cloaked in divine promise. Yet as they clung to their rosaries, hoping for a miracle, the real horror was lurking just beyond the horizon, a fate worse than the trials of faith. Ever hear of the Pilgrim's Progress? More like Pilgrim's Peril. Because for every saintly shrine, there lay a curse, a dead man's curse, that is. Mothers sent their sons out into the wilds, thinking they'd return saints, not corpses. But hey, who needs a happy ending when you can have a thrilling tale of horror and humor? Think your romanticized vision of medieval devotion won't end in blood? Think again. Imagine stepping over the bones of your fallen comrades, laughing nervously as you stumble on every grave marker, while a thief lurks in the shadows, ready to turn your faith into folly. Every rustle in the bushes is a reminder: one wrong turn could lead to an unspeakable fate. Will you be the next victim of the road's treachery? Spoiler alert, it's a lot more likely than enlightenment. What's the punchline, you ask? The punchline is that every pilgrim who set out with hope ended up with a story, an electrifying tale of blood, sweat, and tears that turned faith into a twisted game of survival. Think the journey is about finding salvation? Think again. It's a macabre circus of misfortune that leaves even the bravest souls questioning their sanity. So, why wouldn't you want to be a medieval pilgrim? Because beneath the robes of sanctity lies a carnival of chaos where every step drags you deeper into an abyss of uncertainty. And let's be honest, you'd rather binge-watch Netflix than gamble your life on fate's cruel deck of cards. The truth clicks in your mind like a lock: once you know, there's no turning back. Are you ready to face what lies behind the veil? Because once you step inside, there's no escaping the grip of history's darkest secrets. The wind howled through the narrow streets of the village, a harbinger of something unspeakable. Shadows loomed, shifting like phantoms, and I felt the chill of their presence, a gathering of souls lost and searching. They say the dead whisper on nights like this, wrapping their icy fingers around the hearts of the living. As I stood at the edge of the cobblestone road, the flickering lanterns cast a ghostly glow, making the world feel both alive and unreal. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and desperation, an intoxicating blend that twisted my gut. I could see them, 3 figures cloaked in tattered garments, their faces obscured by hoods, yet I could sense the weight of their burdens. Each step they took was heavy, burdened not just by the packs on their backs but by the weight of their hopes, fears, and unspoken sins. They were pilgrims, drawn to the allure of sacred sites, searching for redemption on the cobbled paths that might lead them to heaven or to hell. Myra, the youngest among them, walked with purpose, her thin frame quivering but resolute. I could see her hands clenched, as if holding on to something fragile, something that might slip away if she relaxed her grip. Her mother had died last winter, the fever stealing away the woman who had been her anchor, her only compass in a tumultuous sea of grief. Now, Myra sought solace in the echoes of saints, believing deeply that at the shrine of St. James, she might find her mother again, if not in form, then in the whispers of the past. Her emerald eyes sparkled with tears that had yet to fall, glimmering like the distant stars that felt so near, yet so utterly unattainable. Beside her, Bran trudged along, his face chiseled from years of hardship. The lines etched into his forehead spoke of deep-seated fears, of nights spent wrestling with shadows that refused to yield. He had lost his son to a wandering band of brigands, just a lad of 8, who had only wanted to see the horizon beyond their village. Bran had carved a small wooden figure, an effigy meant to protect his boy, but it had not been enough. With each step, he prayed that some divine entity could deliver him from the guilt that gnawed at him like a starving wolf. The pilgrimage was his last hope, a desperate move to appease a universe that felt cruelly indifferent to his suffering. And then there was old Edda, a woman whose age was hard to measure, her body bent with time but her spirit still fierce. She stumbled and often cursed the gods beneath her breath, her words a tapestry of bitterness woven with threads of loss. She had lost her home to the fires of war, her family scattered like ash on the wind. She sought refuge in the sacred sites, not for the promise of salvation but as a way to outrun the ghosts that tracked her every step. Edda was not searching for forgiveness, she had made peace with her sins, but for a final resting place where her bones could lie undisturbed. As they trudged forward, the ground beneath them twisted and turned, a treacherous path leading them deeper into the unknown. The shadows danced with malevolence, a silent reminder of their fears, their regrets. I could hear their ragged breaths, feel the pulse of their hearts as they marched toward the distant horizon, where hope flickered like a dying flame. The night deepened, and the moon emerged as a bitter spectator, cold and distant, illuminating their plight. They found an ancient well, its stones slick with moss, the water within dark and fathomless. Myra stepped forward, her heart racing, the memories of her mother flooding back. "I remember," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind, "the way she sang to me, how her laughter filled the air like a sweet melody." She leaned over the edge, staring into the depths, waiting for an answer that would never come. Bran watched her, the ache in his chest tightening, as he recalled the last time he'd held his son's hand, the warmth of that tiny palm slipping away like grains of sand. "I remember," he said, his voice hoarse, "the way he looked at me, eyes full of wonder, as if I held the universe in my hands." The darkness of the well reflected their sorrow, a mirror of their souls, each one grappling with loss, each one haunted by the shadows of the past. Old Edda stepped closer, her voice a low growl. "You're chasing ghosts." Her words dripped with a venom born of desperation. There is no solace to be found in ancient stones. Yet even as she spoke, she felt the pull of the sacred site, a siren song that echoed deep within the marrow of her bones. The air crackled with tension, a raw, electric charge coursing through their veins as the well responded with a low gurgle, a beckoning call that sent shivers down their spines. Each heartbeat echoed the ancient rhythms of the earth, the pulse of 1,000 pilgrims who had come before them, seeking meaning, seeking connection, seeking something just beyond reach. Myra turned, her eyes alight with a sudden fire. "But what if we find them? What if they're waiting for us?" Her voice was a fragile tether, quaking with hope. Edda glanced at her, the ghost of a smile flickering across her lips, a fleeting moment that felt almost sacrilegious in its brightness. Bran, lost in the wreckage of his heart, searched for words but found nothing but the silence of the night, the weight of grief pressing down like a stone. And so, they stood there, caught in the pull of the abyss, each one wrestling with their demons, the air thick with longing and despair. They were drawn together by pain, yet torn apart by their individual journeys. The night loomed large, an eternal canvas waiting to be painted with their stories. The sacred site was a promise, a flicker of hope in a world steeped in shadows, but as they leaned into the void, they knew that the journey had only just begun. Each whisper of the wind carried a question, each rustle of leaves a challenge, and with every shaky breath, they stepped closer to the confrontation they both dreaded and desired. And as they moved onward, the shadows stretched and morphed, whispering secrets, spinning tales of those who had come before, each one a reminder that in the heart of darkness, the journey itself could birth the light. The night was a shroud of darkness, a black canvas splattered with the cold glimmer of stars, as Anwen pulled her tattered cloak tighter around her thin frame. The forest loomed like a beast, its twisted branches the gnarled fingers of long-dead spirits, reaching out with whispers that danced along her skin. Tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating. She could hear the rustle of leaves, could feel the weight of a predator's gaze lingering in the shadows. It wasn't just the chill of the night that sent shivers down her spine, it was the haunting possibility of bandits lying in wait, hungry for the spoils of the unwary traveler. She wasn't alone. Beside her, Thomas, a youthful lad with bright eyes dulled by fear, gripped a makeshift club so tightly his knuckles were white. She could sense his heart pounding, could feel the tremors radiating from his small frame. I remember my mother's words, he whispered, each syllable trembling like the leaves above them. She said, the road is dark and full of terrors, but there's light at the end. A brave sentiment, but the reality of it gnawed at her soul. Light? Their journey had been nothing but a series of shadows, each twist of the path bringing more uncertainty. Then there was Gwendolen, the fearless warrior whose spirit flickered like a candle in a howling storm. Her confidence was a facade, cracking under the weight of their predicament. Stay close, she commanded, a tremor betraying her bravado as she peered into the abyss of the trees. We can't let them take us. The resolve in her voice was an anchor, but Anwen saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the way her fingers brushed a hidden dagger beneath her cloak. They had come so far, and yet the thought of being robbed, or worse, sent bile rising in Anwen's throat. The terrain shifted beneath their feet, the earth treacherous, roots like snakes coiling around their ankles. Each step brought them closer to a confrontation, or maybe an end. Shadows danced around them, creatures lurking just beyond the periphery of their vision. Anwen's mind spiraled into memories of her village, laughter echoing in the cobblestone streets, sunlight warm on her skin. But those memories felt like dreams now, distant and unreachable, as if they belonged to another life. The weight of the world pressed down on her, each heartbeat a reminder of their peril. I remember, she breathed, inhaling the metallic scent of fear that lingered in the air. I remember the stories, the warnings of travelers taken by storm and bandit, of bodies left to the crows. They say the forest swallows you whole, that once you enter, you are never truly free. Her voice trembled, an unsteady confession. The words clawed at her throat, but she couldn't swallow them down. They were the truth, and truth has a way of revealing our deepest fears. Anwen, stop! Thomas blurted, his voice rising in panic. You're scaring me. The young boy's eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears. Yet even in his fear, there was a spark, a flicker of defiance. We must keep moving. The sooner we reach the village, the sooner we can what? Gwendolen snapped, cutting him off. What do you think awaits us? Safety? The roads are fraught with danger, and the villagers are no more welcoming than the forest. They'll see us as thieves, as vagabonds. Her voice cracked, the bravado slipping away as desperation clawed at her heart. Each word felt like a blade, sharp and unyielding. Trust me, Thomas, we are not safe yet. We are not home. Silence swallowed them, heavier than the darkness itself, until the stillness was shattered by the unmistakable sound of hooves on gravel. The trio froze, the air thick with dread. Bandits, Anwen whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. They all turned, eyes wide, hearts racing, as the shadows morphed into dark figures, looming specters of terror against the dim light of the moon. The riders emerged, cloaked in darkness, faces obscured by hoods that draped like funeral shrouds. Laughter echoed, a haunting sound that sent a chill down Anwen's spine. It was a discordant melody, a celebration of their misery. Look what we have here, one of the bandits sneered, eyes glinting with malice. 3 lost souls wandering the woods. How delightful! Anwen's heart raced, thunderous in her chest. Panic surged through her veins, hot and visceral. She could feel the weight of their stares, the sharpness of blades glinting in the light. Run! Gwendolen shouted suddenly, and the command jolted Anwen into action. The trio turned, breaking into a sprint, the forest blurring around them. The ground was a treacherous maze as branches clawed at their faces and roots threatened to trip them. Anwen could hear the bandits behind them, laughter mingling with their shouts. Cowards, they called. You think you can escape? As they dashed through the underbrush, desperation fueled their flight. Each breath was an echo of terror, a reminder of what lay behind, the relentless pursuit, the darkness that stalked them. Anwen's lungs burned, her legs screamed for rest, but she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. The thought of capture, of their fate in those hands, was more terrifying than the dark itself. Over here! Gwendolen shouted, pointing to a thicket that promised shelter. They dove into the underbrush, hearts hammering in their chests, praying to the gods of the night that the shadows would save them. Anwen pressed her back against the cold earth, breath hitching as she listened to the chaos around them. The laughter faded, but the tension hung thick, a noose tightening around their throats. "What now?" Thomas breathed, eyes wide with fear. Anwen dared not answer, her heart pounding, fear swirling in the pit of her stomach. They were trapped, lost in the dark with ghosts of their own making. Each heartbeat echoed the unspoken truth, danger lurked everywhere, and the shadows held more than just their fears. They held the reality of a world unkind to those who dared travel its treacherous paths. And in that moment, as the forest whispered its secrets and the night closed in around them, Anwen felt the weight of the past, present, and future converge into a single heartbeat, the raw, unyielding truth of survival. The road ahead was fraught with peril, but it was a road they must tread, a path etched in fear and fraught with uncertainty. The night had only just begun, and the danger lurking within the shadows had only begun to unfold. The air was thick, suffocating, heavy with the stench of decay. I stood on the edge of the dirt road, heart racing, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, its dying light casting long shadows that clung to the ground like ghosts. A sickening gurgle erupted from behind me, and I turned just in time to see old Miriam, her frail body trembling, collapse to the ground. Her hand pressed against her abdomen, a grotesque twist of pain etched across her face. In that moment, the world shuddered. Hope bled out, pooling around us like the muck that surrounded our feet. I remember the first time I saw her smile, bright like sunlight piercing through dark clouds. That was long before we knew the truth, before the diseases crept in like uninvited guests at a feast. Miriam had told stories that made you forget the biting cold at night, tales woven with laughter that echoed down the cobbled streets of our village. But now, that laughter was silenced, replaced by whispers of sickness and death. I squeezed my eyes shut, clenching my fists. "Stay with us, Miriam," I whispered, but the words felt desperate, hollow against the cacophony of her gasping breaths. Beside me, Jonas shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between Miriam and the crumbling shanty that served as our makeshift medical tent. He had always been the brave one, the one who believed he could fix everything with his hands, if only he had the right tools, the right knowledge. But here, amidst the stench of unwashed bodies and festering wounds, he seemed smaller, lost in the weight of his own inadequacies. "I can help her," he insisted, but his voice trembled as if he were trying to convince himself. "I remember the time we joked about cleanliness. What's a little dirt?" I had laughed. "We bathe once a year. Romance is earthy." We had snickered, but that laughter felt like a cruel mockery now, the kind of laughter that echoed in dark corners of the mind when faced with mortality. The reality was harsh, our bodies were battlefields, waging war against invisible enemies, and the weapons we wielded, water, salt, a few herbs, were practically useless against the onslaught of disease. I felt the weight of that truth, crushing, unrelenting. Miriam's moans pierced the evening air, her skin slick with sweat and grime. I watched as she clawed at the dirt, her fingers digging into the earth as if searching for salvation. "Help me, please," she gasped, her voice a ghost of its former self. The desperation in her eyes sent ice through my veins. I could see the fear lurking there, the realization that her body was failing her, that the world we had known was slipping away. Jonas knelt beside her, hands shaking, and I could see the flicker of panic in his gaze as he fumbled through the rags that made up their supplies. "We need clean water," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Clean water. A luxury that had become a cruel joke. I felt the anger boiling within me, a visceral rage at the injustice of our situation, at the cruel hand of fate that dealt us this hand of sickness. "What good is that when we can't even keep ourselves clean?" I spat, words laced with anguish. I remember the nights spent worrying about what the dawn would bring. Shadows creeping through the cracks in our walls, the sound of coughing echoing through the streets, the distant wails of mourning that haunted us like a macabre lullaby. Each heartbeat was a reminder of the ticking clock, each breath laced with the fear of what would come next. "Miriam, hold on!" Jonas cried, urgency crashing over him. His hands were clumsy, trembling as he pressed against her belly, desperate for any sign of life. The soil beneath us felt like quicksand, and I thought of the graves that lined the outskirts of the village, the names fading from memory, the bodies forgotten. I wanted to scream, to tear the sky apart and demand answers. Why did we have to suffer like this? Why were we left alone in this hell? I could see it in Miriam's eyes, the flicker of recognition, the dawning horror that the fight was slipping away. "I'm so tired," she whispered, and in that moment, an unearthly stillness enveloped us, a silence that spoke volumes of despair. The world faded, and all that remained was the sound of her labored breathing, punctuated by the harsh reality that we were powerless to save her. We were surrounded by the shadows of death, and I felt its cold breath on my neck. I wanted to shake Clarity into Jonas, to slap him awake from this nightmare. "This isn't just about Miriam," I hissed, my heart pounding in my ears. "Every day we walk this road, we risk everything. The diseases, the filth, the ignorance. It's a death sentence." His eyes locked onto mine, a reflection of my own pain and fear. "I can't lose her," he croaked, and I could see the cracks forming in his bravado, the despair cloaking him like a shroud. "I can't," then Miriam gasped, her eyes rolling back as if she were already slipping into the void. "Help me," she breathed one last time, a plea that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt my heart shatter, pieces scattering like dust in the wind. And as the sun disappeared fully, plunging us into darkness, I knew we were all on the brink, teetering on the edge of despair, caught in an endless cycle of suffering. The road stretched before us, long and unforgiving, a relentless reminder of the battles waged against us. We were nothing more than shadows in a world that had forgotten how to care, trapped in a nightmare of disease, poor sanitation, and a lack of medical knowledge that threatened to consume us whole. And as we stood there, fear and desperation swirling around us, I knew that this was just the beginning. The story was far from over. The thunder rolled like a beast awakening from slumber, an ominous growl that quaked through the earth, sending birds scattering into the leaden sky. I stood there, drenched, no, drowning, under the relentless downpour that blurred the world around me into an impressionist nightmare. The pilgrims around me, faces pale and eyes wide with dread, clutched their makeshift umbrellas like shields against a vengeful army. I couldn't remember the last time I felt the ground beneath my feet. Everything was mud, a treacherous quagmire that threatened to swallow us whole. Myra, the firebrand, a girl with dreams etched in her eyes and a heart that beat with the rhythm of a battle drum, stumbled beside me. Her breath heaved like a furnace caught in a storm, and I saw it then, the flicker of fear stealing the light from her spirit. "We can't stop now," she gasped, the wind tugging viciously at her hair, as if nature itself conspired to take her away. "Not now." But as the rain lashed against our skin, I could see the doubt creeping in, wrapping its icy fingers around her resolve. And then there was Theo, a man whose kindness should have made him invincible, yet here he was, trembling in the cold, his gentle nature battered by the howling wind. He looked up at the roiling clouds, eyes wide, as if searching for answers in the chaos above. "We should turn back," he murmured, and each word chiseled into the air with the weight of surrender. The pilgrimage had promised redemption, a chance to wash away our burdens, but this weather, it was like a curse, a dark omen that threatened to dismantle our very souls. I remember the sun, its golden rays that used to warm our skin and fill our hearts with hope. Memories of laughter and shared stories around a fire flickered in my mind, now replaced by this predatory tempest. The storm pressed down upon us, each raindrop a reminder of our vulnerability. "We're not equipped for this," Theo continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "It's not just rain, it's a warning." I glanced at him, and for a moment, we exchanged a look steeped in fear and uncertainty. The unthinkable gnawed at my insides. What if this pilgrimage, this quest for something greater, was doomed? Myra took a breath, her voice slicing through the fear like a knife. "We're stronger together," she said, but even as she spoke, a shudder rippled through her, revealing cracks in her facade. "Remember the stories of those before us? The ones who walked these paths." Her words felt like echoes of an age long past, and I wanted to believe them, to cling to the hope they offered. But the rain fell heavier, drowning out our courage with each relentless wave. A flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the shadows that danced across the ground. I could almost hear the whispers of those long gone, their voices calling from the depths of history. What if we're nothing more than ghosts in this storm? I thought, my heart pounding. The air was thick with tension, an electric charge that made the hair on my arm stand on end. The road was turning into a torrent, and the shadows of doubt began to stretch, looming larger than life. I wanted to scream, to break free from the suffocating grip of uncertainty that wrapped around us like a noose. In the distance, the outline of the ancient shrine beckoned, a shimmering mirage in the chaos. Hope flickered, a candle in a tempest, but the storm seemed to sense our ambition and roared back, a wild beast defending its territory. I felt my spirit sink. Could we really keep going? The path ahead was obscured, swallowed by the waves of rain that cascaded down like a waterfall of despair. "Let's rest for a moment," Theo suggested, his voice a fragile whisper. "Just until it calms down." I could see the desperation in his eyes, the struggle between the desire to push forward and the instinct to survive. But as we huddled together, I could feel the weight of the storm pressing down harder, mocking our fragile hope. I closed my eyes, trying to summon a vision of the sun, but all I could see was darkness, a swirling vortex of what ifs that threatened to drag us under. And then Myra's breath hitched, a sound so raw it sliced through the haze. "Do you feel that?" Her eyes were wide, searching the storm like it held hidden truths. "Something is coming." A gust of wind howled through us, and I braced myself, the chill sinking into my bones. What was coming? The world felt poised on a knife's edge, reality teetering as if it might plunge into the abyss of despair or ascend into the light of hope. I wanted to shake my head, to push away the ominous thoughts, but they clung to me like shadows in the fading light. "Let's move," I finally said, fighting against the rising tide of fear. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but deep down, an ember of determination ignited. We were pilgrims, after all, bound by promises made and roads traveled. The storms might rage, but so too could our spirits. As we pressed on, the rain began to morph into something more, a torrential downpour that sought to tear apart our very souls. Each step was a battle against the earth pulling us down, yet we climbed. It was madness, pure and unrelenting. In those moments, the storm was not just a backdrop, it was a living entity, a reflection of our internal struggles, our doubts, our dreams. We were caught in the tempest, yet as I looked at Myra and Theo, I felt something shift. The storm, with all its chaos, was a crucible, a fire that could either consume us or forge us anew. I didn't know what lay ahead, but the weight of uncertainty morphed into a fierce resolve. Together, we would weather this storm, not just as individuals lost against the uncertainties of nature, but as a collective force, binding our hopes and fears into something indomitable. The thunder rumbled again, more furious this time, and I felt it resonate within me. The weather was chaos incarnate, but within that chaos, we were finding our strength. Each raindrop that splattered against my skin was a reminder of the fight, a pulse that echoed through the wilderness of uncertainty. As we trudged forward, hearts pounding, souls entwined, I knew this storm would not define us. No, our journey was just beginning, and even the darkest clouds could not extinguish the flame of hope that flickered within. The sun hung low in the bruised sky, a dying ember swallowed by the jagged edges of the horizon. Its light faltered, casting slanted shadows that distorted the faces of the three trudging forward. I could taste the grit on my tongue, the sandy air scraping against my throat. Each step echoed the pulse of desperation. We had become shadows of ourselves, hollow, fragile. "Fuck," Ellen wheezed, a sound more like a gasp. Her voice trembled, the quiver revealing the truth lurking behind her bravado. "What's left?" I fumbled through the tattered bag that had once been a vibrant red, its color now a sickly, sun-bleached pink. My fingers brushed against the remnants of our rations, 2 dried-out crusts of bread, a handful of wilted herbs, and a single, shriveled apple. Hope twisted in my gut like a knife. I remembered the laughter of the market, the scent of ripe fruit bursting with sweetness. I remember the way Ellen's eyes lit up with joy as she bit into the first peach of the season, juice running down her chin. But here, in this wasteland, joy was a ghost, haunting us with bitter memories. "Just enough for a day, maybe," I muttered, each word heavy with dread. Ellen's brow furrowed, shadows deepening in her features. She was always the strong one, the fighter, but even she looked as if the wind might scatter her away. "How long can we last?" Her question hung in the air like fog, thick and suffocating. An unsettling silence answered, punctuated only by the distant corps of crows, sentinels surveying our downfall. The sun sank, dragging our hopes deeper into the darkness. We pressed on, every step a challenge against the biting winds and the gnawing emptiness in our bellies. I could feel the fatigue weaving through my muscles, turning each movement into a laborious task. Marcus walked ahead, jaw clenched tight, shoulders hunched. His silence was a crack in the dam, ready to break and drown us all in despair. "Marcus," I called, forcing the word through my dry throat. "Hold on." He turned, eyes wild, haunted. "How can I?" The crack in his voice fractured something within me. "We're dying out here, and you want me to hold on." The desperation in his tone was an electric jolt, igniting the fear that had nestled in my chest, spitting it back into my throat. "We'll find water, we have to." But how? The horizon shimmered with heat, a mirage of promises that faded each time we reached for it. I could feel the truth of our situation, a gnawing certainty that clawed at my insides. I remember the first day, so naive, so hopeful. We had packed our bags with provisions, convinced we could conquer this forsaken land. Ellen's laughter rang in my ears, a sweet echo against the harsh reality. "Just think of the stories we'll tell," she'd said, her eyes sparkling like stars in the night. But now the stories felt like shackles, dragging us down into a void of despair. "Is that what you want?" Marcus snapped, his voice sharp as glass. "To tell stories of how we starved? How we crumbled into dust?" I felt the weight of his accusation, a bitter truth swirling in the air between us. We were living ghosts, shackled to the past, suffocating in the present. Ellen pressed her hands against her stomach, a gesture that struck me with urgency. "We can't do this." "Not anymore," she whispered, the rawness in her voice tearing through the fabric of my resolve. Her words hung in the air, a lifeline and a noose all at once. I grasped at them, feeling the fraying edges of our sanity. "We can rest," I offered, a feeble attempt to keep the darkness at bay. "Just for tonight, we can rest." Marcus interrupted, a bleak laugh escaping his lips. "Rest in the arms of starvation? We'll wake up to nothing." I wanted to scream, to shake him until he understood that this was not just a journey, but a trial by fire. The sun vanished, leaving us in a cloak of night, and with it, our hope flickered like a dying candle. Ellen's breath hitched. "It's getting colder," she said, her voice trembling like the last leaf clinging to a barren branch. What if we don't make it through?" I wanted to tell her we would, that the dawn would come, but the reality was a heavy weight on my tongue. I thought of water, how it was the elixir of life, how it had once flowed freely from mountain streams and rain-soaked clouds. Now we were left to suck on the bones of our dreams, each sip of air a reminder of our futility. The stars above us twinkled like cruel, distant eyes, watching our descent into madness. I remembered the stories told by the fire, the warmth of laughter wrapping around us like a blanket. I started, each word a lifeline tossed into the churning sea of despair. I remember the taste of fresh bread, the crunch of apples, the way the world felt vibrant. Ellen's eyes glimmered in the dark, haunted yet yearning. "I remember too," she whispered, and for a fleeting moment, we were wrapped in nostalgia, lost in a memory of a different life. But the memory was a cruel thief, dragging us back to the present where bellies were empty, and despair coiled tightly around our throats. "Tomorrow," Marcus said, his voice breaking the fragile silence. "We'll push on. One more day, one more step." But what lay ahead was an abyss, a chasm of uncertainty and fear. I could feel the ache of despair creeping in, a slow, relentless tide. I could see the ghosts of our hope scattered across the horizon, flickering like distant stars. And as the cold crept deeper into our bones, I realized we were not just fighting against hunger and thirst. We were battling the shadows within ourselves, the haunting specters of dreams unfulfilled. "Hold on," I murmured, the words barely escaping my lips. But in this darkness, it felt as if we were all losing our grip. The night stretched endlessly before us, a yawning more ready to swallow us whole. Our journey was far from over, the struggle only just beginning, and with each passing moment, the fragile thread of hope strained, threatening to snap. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with shadows that seemed to writhe and dance. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of sweat and stale ale, a cocktail of despair and desperation that clung to the walls like a shroud. I felt it then, the chill of fear curling around my spine, whispering secrets of what lay beyond the doorway. It was just an inn, or at least that's what the sign outside had promised, but the flickering candlelight cast an unsettling glow, illuminating the faces of those huddled in the corner. Eyes darted, hungry and hollow, like wolves waiting for the first tremor of weakness to signal their next meal. I remember the moment I stepped inside, the feeling of the threshold beneath my feet, cold, unforgiving wood, as if it could sense the weight of all the souls who had crossed it before me. I clutched my cloak tighter around my shoulders, feeling the fabric scratch against my skin, a reminder of the warmth I could not afford. In this world of stone and shadow, I was just another lost traveler, a flicker of existence flickering uncertainly among ghosts that haunted this place. Beside me, Clara shifted uneasily, her breath coming in quick bursts, a wild look in her eyes. I could see the light of hope fading, crushed beneath the weight of her memories. She had once dreamed of grand adventures, of castles and kingdoms, but here she was, a mere spectre of her former self, haunted by the ghosts of choices made and paths not taken. I heard her whisper, "Please, just this once." The plea hung in the air, brittle as glass. Not far from us, a man sat hunched over a table, his fingers trembling as they clutched a cup that looked far too grand for the contents it held. I could see the edge of his cloak fraying, a remnant of a life that had once been vibrant. He raised his eyes, and for a brief second, I glimpsed a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding of the burdens we all carried. The inn had become a refuge, but it was also a trap, a net woven from desperation and despair. "Time's ticking, you know," Clara muttered, glancing at the crooked clock on the wall, its hands moving forward but tethered by the past, as if mocking our plight. "We can't stay here." But where would we go? The night was a vast expanse of uncertainty, filled with unseen dangers that lurked just beyond the light, a reality we both knew too well. I remember the stories told in whispers, of travelers vanishing, of shadows moving without bodies, of innkeepers with smiles that masked rotting teeth. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant echo from the kitchen felt like a warning, a premonition of the horrors awaiting those who dared to close their eyes in such a place. Clara's hands trembled, and I reached for them, grounding us both, a fragile lifeline in a world intent on tearing us apart. "Stay close, Clara," I hissed, my voice barely a whisper above the cacophony of laughter and shouts that seemed to reverberate from the very walls. The others in the inn were lost in their revelry, their laughter oddly discordant, each chuckle a reminder of the darkness that lay just beneath the surface. I wanted to tell her that we were safe, that the shadows were mere figments of our imagination, but I could feel the truth gnawing at the edges of my bravado. We were trapped, by choice, by circumstance, by fear. Then the door swung open again, and a gust of wind swept through the room, chilling us to our bones. A figure stepped inside, cloaked in darkness, face hidden beneath a hood. The atmosphere shifted, a tangible tension that gripped us all. The laughter faded into silence, replaced by an electric thrill, a breath held in collective anticipation. I caught Clara's eye, and in that split second, time stretching and fracturing like glass, we understood the unspoken truth. This was no ordinary traveler. The figure moved with a predatory grace, and every heart in the room quickened, each pulse a drumbeat echoing our shared fear. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The figure approached the bar, and the innkeeper straightened, his smile faltering, eyes flicking nervously to the door as if wishing for escape. "Something to drink," the innkeeper stammered, voice thin as parchment. The figure tilted its head, a gesture that sent shivers rippling through the room. I could feel Clara's grip tighten around my hand, her pulse a rapid rhythm against my palm, our shared dread palpable in the air. "I'm looking for someone," the figure rasped, voice low and haunting, like the whisper of a ghost. "Someone who knows the way." I dared not breathe, not even a whisper of air. The tension thickened, wrapping around us like a noose. The other patrons shifted, glancing towards the door as if it held the promise of safety. But the night was alive beyond the threshold, a restless beast that awaited our missteps. Clara's eyes sparkled with unshed tears, and I felt the weight of desperation pressing down on us, an anchor dragging us deeper into the abyss. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling like a candle flame. I didn't know. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be all right, but the truth was, we were standing on the precipice of a nightmare, and the darkness was hungry. I remember the chill of the room wrapping around me, the shadows lengthening, clawing at our sanity, as fear pulsed through every heartbeat. The walls seemed to lean in, listening, waiting. I squeezed Clara's hand tighter, feeling the warmth of her skin against the coldness of this place, a small reminder that even in horror, there was still a flicker of life. The figure turned away from the bar, and in that moment, the world held its breath. Shadows danced in the corners, and the silence grew heavy with unspoken terror. Clara's eyes were wide, brimming with fear, and I could feel the weight of our choices pressing down upon us, a reminder of all we were risking for the sake of shelter. "Do you think they can see us?" she breathed, her voice quivering. I didn't have an answer. The shadows had become a living thing, and they were hungry. Without a word, I turned and led Clara through the crowded room, hearts pounding as we navigated the sea of faces, each one a mask hiding untold stories. A low murmur rose behind us as the figure moved, and I felt the air crackle with tension, an electric jolt that sent chills racing down my spine. Behind me, I could hear whispers, echoes of lives lived in fear, the ghosts of travelers lost to the night. I remember thinking of the stories that had been spun in this very place, lives crumbling under the weight of inadequate shelter, dreams shattered like glass. As we reached the door, I knew that the inn was not a refuge but a trap, and we were just two more souls caught in its web. "Let's go," I whispered, pushing the door open against the night, the chill biting at my skin. The darkness yawned before us, limitless and terrifying, but we had no choice. The unknown awaited, a new chapter unfurling in the tapestry of our lives, and I could only hope that the light would shine bright enough to guide us through. The sun was a molten orange, sinking behind the jagged peaks, and I stood at the crossroads where paths converged like veins. The earth beneath my feet rumbled with echoes of ancient footsteps, the air thick with whispers, of prayers, of curses, of dreams buried beneath the weight of expectations. I was lost, not just in the wild terrain of the pilgrimage route but in the cavernous depths of my own conflicted soul. 2 days, 2 days, shouted a voice, sharp and cutting through the dusk, pulling me back from the edge of my thoughts. It was Amir, his eyes blazing with urgency. "We must reach the village by nightfall." His breath came fast, a frantic rhythm, as if he were running not just from the physical journey but from something deeper, something that gnawed at his spirit. I looked at him, the way his brow furrowed in a dance of anxiety and determination. Amir, a devout believer, a man whose faith was woven into the very fabric of his being. Yet here we were, pilgrims caught in a storm of foreign tongues and strange customs, his belief challenged by the very people he sought to commune with. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, the tension curling around my words. The laughter of children rang out, a shrill sound that echoed through the valley. It was joyous, yet a cruel reminder of the cultural chasm that separated us. I remembered my own laughter, the innocent glee of a child when the world was perfect. But here, laughter felt like an accusation. They were unaware, blissfully ignorant of the chasms that lurked between our worlds. Another voice pierced the air, Maria, her eyes wide, scanning the horizon where shadows loomed like ominous spirits. "They don't understand us, Amir. We don't belong here." Her shoulders slumped, the weight of her realization crushing her hope. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, and I felt the tremor of her vulnerability. Maria, brave yet fragile, had come seeking solace, only to find herself ensnared in a web of misunderstandings. The dirt road stretched endlessly before us, winding into the unknown. Every step echoed with the weight of our fears, shadows flickering along the path, the sun retreating faster than our courage. I watched as Amir's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white as bone. He had come to uplift his faith, to share the light, yet now it felt as though the darkness clung to him like a second skin. "Let's just keep moving," he said, but I could see the tremor in his voice. It was a mantra, a desperate attempt to silence the doubts echoing in his mind. I could feel them too. The faces of those we encountered along the way, their eyes cold like steel, their words harsh and jagged, slicing through our flimsy understanding. A sudden gust of wind swept through, carrying with it the scent of spices and smoke. My heart raced as I recalled our first encounter with the village, a cacophony of foreign sounds, a market alive with colors I had never seen before, a world that thrummed with a life force that was both intoxicating and terrifying. We had stumbled through it like blind mice, our clumsy attempts at communication met with laughter or confusion. I had tried to say something simple, just a greeting, but the words twisted in my mouth, leaving a bitter taste. There, in that moment, I understood the fracture between us. Language was a bridge, but it could also be a chasm, a void that swallowed our intentions whole. The laughter of the children, so innocent, became a reminder of how far we were from understanding each other. Each smile, each gesture, felt like a dagger thrust into my chest. Amir stumbled, lost in thought, and I caught a glimpse of his inner turmoil. He longed for connection, yet felt it fading like the sun behind the horizon. I could see the flicker of anger and despair in his eyes as he muttered under his breath, words in his native tongue, a prayer, a curse, a plea for clarity. "Do you think they see us as monsters?" Maria asked softly, the shadows creeping closer, wrapping around us like a shroud. "What if they see our faith as a burden?" Her voice wavered, and I felt the sting in my own heart. We were the intruders, the unwelcome guests in a world that held its own rhythm, its own beliefs, and we were stumbling in the dark. The air thickened, and I felt the overwhelming weight of the moment pressing down on us. The moment stretched like a taut string, ready to snap. We were pilgrims, yes, but we were also trespassers in a land that pulsed with life, unaware of the sacredness of its routines. A figure emerged from the shadows, a villager, stooped and weathered, eyes glimmering like shards of glass. He stopped, watching us with a gaze that pierced through to our very souls. I felt my breath hitch, an unspoken tension dancing between us. What did he see? The fear? The desperation? Or a flicker of shared humanity? "Help!" Amir's voice rang out, a plea for communion, but it shattered the fragile stillness. The villager's expression darkened, his body stiffening, a wall rising where an invitation could have been. It was a clash, a collision of worlds that left us standing on the precipice, teetering between understanding and rejection. The night stretched on, a vast expanse of silence punctuated by the distant calls of unseen creatures. I thought of the dreams I had before this pilgrimage, painted with the hues of hope and discovery, and how quickly they turned to ash. Maria wrapped her arms around herself, trembling, a shard of moonlight illuminating her face, casting deep shadows in the hollows of her cheeks. "We're the outsiders," she breathed, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "They carry their own stories, their own burdens. Who are we to impose our beliefs?" The question hung heavy in the air, the weight of it anchoring us in place, and I felt as if the night itself held its breath, waiting for our answer. As the stars blinked down, indifferent witnesses to our turmoil, I could feel the ground shifting beneath us. We were three souls tangled in the invisible threads of misunderstanding, the risks of culture clashing like relentless waves against a rocky shore. The world felt as vast as the cosmos, and here we were, mere specks, lost, searching, hoping for a connection that felt forever out of reach. In that moment, the silence became deafening, and I realized that we were not merely walking a path, we were unraveling our very identities, torn between the desire to belong and the fear of intrusion. The shadows danced around us, a reflection of our own fears, as I took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of the unknown. I remember feeling a pull, a yearning for clarity as we stood there, frozen in the twilight. And yet, the darkness loomed closer, threatening to swallow us whole. Each heartbeat echoed like a warning, a reminder that the road was long, the pilgrimage fraught with risks that had yet to reveal themselves. But in this moment of uncertainty, I also felt a flicker of hope. Amid the misunderstandings, amid the shadows, perhaps there was a chance to bridge the chasm, to reach out into the unknown and find a light in the darkness. We stood together, lost yet united in our quest, the weight of our pasts merging into a shared future, uncertain yet compelling, as we took the next step forward into the abyss. The sky hung low, a heavy blanket of grey that seemed to press down on the world, and I could taste the damp earth on my tongue. Each step forward felt like a betrayal of my flesh, a reminder of the blisters forming beneath my calloused skin. I caught a glimpse of Clara ahead, her silhouette swaying like a ghost in the fading light. She paused, one hand pressed against a tree, the other clutching her side as if the very air was trying to squeeze the breath from her lungs. I wanted to call out to her, to offer a word of comfort, but the effort it took to form coherent thoughts felt insurmountable. The exhaustion clung to me, a shadow whispering doubts and fears that wrapped around my heart like a vice. "I can't go on," she gasped, and the sound pierced the silence, raw and electric. I felt it reverberate within me, echoing my own weariness. I wanted to tell her it wasn't true, that she had strength buried somewhere deep inside her, but all I could do was watch as she leaned into the tree, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Next to me, Matt stumbled, his foot catching on a root that sprang from the earth like a twisted finger. "I'm fine," he insisted, though the wobble in his knees betrayed him. "It's just a rock." He forced a laugh that cracked like glass. I could see the way his smile faltered, an illusion crumbling under the weight of fatigue and pain. His face glistened with sweat, and the dirt that clung to his skin could have been mistaken for battle scars, for he fought an invisible war against the relentless call of exhaustion. "I remember when we thought this would be a grand adventure," Clara muttered, her voice a mixture of sarcasm and sorrow, as if nostalgia had transformed into a bitter pill lodged in her throat. "Just a few short weeks of walking, and we'd find ourselves at the end of the world, or at least the end of our sanity." I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the memories to wash over me like an old song that had long since faded. I remembered the thrill in our hearts as we stood at the trailhead, the sun rising behind us, igniting the sky in a blaze of hope. I remembered the laughter, the dreams, the naive belief that the pilgrimage would bestow some sort of enlightenment. But now, as the sun slipped away, casting shadows long and haunting, those dreams felt like ashes on my tongue. Clara cursed softly, pulling off her boot. The sight of her blistered heel, raw and angry, made my heart ache in a way I couldn't articulate. "It's just a little pain," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "I can walk it off." But that's the thing about pain, it doesn't just walk off. It lingers, it festers, it burrows into the bones. I could feel the weariness creeping into my own joints, a slow poison seeping through me like a dark tide. I was becoming a shell, a vessel of discomfort, and all I could think about was the distance still ahead. The path twisted before us, an unyielding serpent that would take our souls if we let it. "Let's just sit for a moment," Matt suggested, though the idea of stopping felt like a betrayal to the journey itself. "Just a moment." His voice cracked under the weight of desperation, and in that moment, I saw the ghost of a man who had dreams too, dreams that were slipping through his fingers like sand. We sank onto the ground, the earth cool beneath us, a fleeting comfort in the face of our shared suffering. I looked at them, my companions in this madness, and I felt the raw pulse of our collective exhaustion. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of damp leaves and something bitter, something that clung to the back of my throat. It was the scent of defeat, of giving in to the primal urge to rest, to surrender to the weight of our bodies. I remember a time when I could walk for miles without a thought, I confessed, my voice feeling foreign in the stillness. When my feet didn't scream at me for every step. Clara chuckled softly, a sound that felt like shards of glass. "Remember when we thought we could conquer the world? That every blister would be worth it." The irony hung thick in the air. Here we were, 3 souls bound by ambition, now reduced to fragments of our former selves. Each blister, each ache, was a testament to our resolve, but they were also shackles, anchoring us to the ground. "What if we don't make it?" Matt's voice broke through the fog of my thoughts, raw and vulnerable. "What if we're just lost?" His words hung heavy, like the weight of the clouds above, and I felt the gravity of them. Lost. It was more than a physical state, it was a haunting echo of our very existence, a creeping doubt that gnawed at the edges of our minds. "Lost isn't where the journey ends," I whispered, though even I didn't believe the words. "It's just part of it." Clara looked up at me, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears, and I could see the flicker of hope mingling with despair. "Then we keep walking," she said, the determination in her voice like a fragile light in the dark. But as we rose, the shadows deepened around us, and I felt the chill of the night creeping into my bones. Each step was a battle against gravity, against the whispers from my body that begged for rest, for solace. My heart thudded in my chest, a primal rhythm that echoed my resolve, even as my body faltered. Every step became a prayer, a confession, a silent scream against the universe that had brought us here. The path was littered with the ghosts of those who had walked before us, their pain palpable in the air, a thick mist of shared suffering. And still, we walked, driven not just by our feet but by the weight of our dreams. The blisters burned, the ache screamed, and yet we pressed on, each heartbeat a promise, each breath a reminder that we were still alive, even if it meant walking through the fire. And as the night deepened around us, the world became a blur of shadows and whispers, a tapestry woven with the threads of our exhaustion, the toll of our pilgrimage marking the way ahead. The road stretched on, an endless ribbon of uncertainty, and in that darkness, we moved forward, together, even as the ghosts of our own fears danced just beyond our reach. The night wrapped itself around her like a shroud, the moon a ghostly witness to her fear. The shadows stretched along the cobblestone streets, whispering secrets that prickled at her skin, urging her to run. Miriam pressed her back against the damp wall of the alley, her breath hitching in her throat, the taste of iron and salt on her lips. The distant clang of metal echoed, thunderous and terrifying, a reminder of what lay outside, of the world that hunted her. In the dark, she clasped the small, worn pendant around her neck, fingers tracing the familiar grooves of the Star of David. Her heart raced, a wild drumbeat against the silence, each thud a prayer, a plea for safety. "Do you hear that?" whispered Eli, his voice barely cutting through the tension. He was close, too close, and Miriam felt the heat of his body, a comfort and a danger all at once. He was a boy, but his eyes held the weight of centuries. They had shared moments that were supposed to be filled with laughter, now they were haunted by despair. "We need to move. They're coming for us." The shadows danced, and with them came the memories. "I remember the sun setting over our village," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread. "I remember laughing with my brother as he spun around, arms outstretched, trying to catch the colors of the sky. But that was a lifetime ago, before the screams, before the fires consumed their home, before they became specters in a world that no longer recognized them." Eli's hand tightened around hers, grounding her in this moment, yet the urgency in his grip mirrored the panic rising within her. The dark cloaks of the authorities loomed in her mind, figures that hunted not just flesh but faith, not just lives but identities. They were the embodiment of her nightmares, the storm that had swept through their lives, leaving destruction in its wake. "Miriam, please." The words were a lifeline. She breathed in the scent of damp earth and fear, her lungs heavy with the weight of their reality. "What if they find us? What if—" "Don't say it," he snapped, his voice cracking like glass. "We can't afford to think like that. We can't." And yet, the thought slithered into her mind, a serpent of dread. What if they were caught? What if they were dragged back to the church, to the pyres, to the flames licking at their skin like the very demons that haunted their dreams? The air grew thick with the scent of smoke and burning flesh, a memory that curled around her like a noose. "Do you think they'll burn us?" The question slipped from her lips, as fragile as a threadbare tapestry. She didn't want to know the answer, but already her heart had painted vivid scenes, the crackling of flames, the smell of charred skin, the laughter of her persecutors echoing in the inferno. Eli swallowed hard, the fear glistening in his eyes like stars struggling to shine in a polluted sky. "No. No, they'll take us somewhere worse. They'll make us," his voice faltered, the thought too monstrous to articulate. His grip softened, and for a moment, they were just two children lost in a world gone mad. But they were not children. The weight of survival bore down on them, the clock ticking with every heartbeat. "There," Miriam hissed suddenly, pointing into the darkness where a figure moved, shrouded in the heavy cloak of night. "We have to go. Now." The figure loomed closer, and a chill raced through her. She felt the prick of tears behind her eyelids, but she blinked them away, refusing to give in to despair. They had come too far. Each step they'd taken was a defiance against the shadows that sought to envelop them, against the very forces that treated them as lesser beings, as pieces of a game they were never meant to play. "Run," she shouted, and they dashed into the night, hearts pounding, feet barely touching the ground as they fled the ghosts of their past. The cobblestones felt unforgiving beneath their feet, and the air tasted like panic. It was a cacophony of breaths and footsteps, a chaotic symphony of survival. The alley twisted and turned, a labyrinth of fear, a maze designed to entrap. And yet, in each corner they rounded, they found a flicker of hope, a doorway, a passage, a whispered promise of freedom. "We can't stop," she urged, her voice fierce, her resolve unyielding. "We won't stop." But what lay ahead? The question clawed at her like a wild animal. Would they find safety, or would they stumble into a trap? The city had eyes, and the eyes were everywhere, watching, judging, waiting for a moment of weakness. It was Eli's turn to falter, and she could see the shadows creeping into his heart. "Miriam," he started, his voice trembling like the leaves in a storm. "What if we don't make it?" Her heart shattered at the vulnerability in his voice, at the boy who had stood firm when the world crumbled around them. "We will," she answered firmly, but inside, doubt coiled around her like a snake. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, every breath a reminder of what they risked. The figure in the cloak was behind them now, the footfalls gaining ground, a predator closing in on its prey. Shadows melted into shadows, and fear clawed at her throat, a choking reminder of the stakes. "Run," she cried again, fierce and raw, and their feet moved faster, desperation lending them wings. But the world felt heavy, a weight that threatened to crush them beneath its cruel indifference. Each corner they turned seemed to take them deeper into darkness, deeper into a realm where hope was an illusion, where faith was a sin. The shadows closed in, each heartbeat echoing like a drum of war, each breath steeped in the fear of what lay ahead. And just as the figure loomed closer, a dark spectre holding all their fates in its hands, Miriam felt something shift inside her. A flicker of defiance ignited, a whispered promise to every soul lost to the flames, to every name erased from existence. "They will not break us," she whispered to the night, her voice trembling with unyielding strength. "We will rise." The moment stretched, raw and electric, a single heartbeat suspended in time, a promise made, a fight ignited, a destiny waiting to unfold. And as they sprinted toward the unknown, the darkness beckoned, but so did the light. A bell tolls in the distance, its sound echoing through the narrow, cobblestone streets of the ancient city. It swells and crashes like the tide against the shore, pulling people from their thoughts, from their sins. I stand at the crumbling edge of the square, breath catching like a fish on dry land as the weight of guilt presses against my chest. A woman, pale as a ghost, kneels in the dirt, fingers trembling as she clutches a rosary. Her eyes are hollow, void of hope, searching the heavens for solace, but finding nothing but shadows. I remember her laughter, a sweet melody drowned now in the agonized silence of her grief. Behind me, Thomas trudges forward, his heavy boots dragging like lead weights. His shoulders slumped, a physical manifestation of his burden. I can see it in his eyes, the haunted look of a man who has tasted sadness and swallowed sin whole, yet remains unrepentant. What could he possibly seek on this pilgrimage but a fleeting moment of redemption, a chance to scrub the blood off his hands with the fervor of prayer? He whispers apologies to the air, words that dissolve like mist before the dawn. I remember when he used to be so full of light, before the darkness crept in, before he let his heart become a graveyard of choices. "Do you think prayer will save us?" I ask, my voice barely breaking through the oppressive silence. My heart races, a wild thing caught in a cage of doubt. I want to believe it can, I want to feel the surge of faith lift me, but the weight of my own sins is a chain, dragging me down into the abyss. He glances at me, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, or understanding. "I don't know," he admits, brows furrowing. "But it's all we have left." We push forward, drawn towards the towering cathedral that looms like a sentinel, its stone facade worn but defiant against the passage of time. The air is thick, saturated with the scents of burnt incense and old wood, a heavy perfume that clings to my skin. Each step feels like an echo, reverberating in the hollows of my mind. Every footfall is a reminder of what I carry, the sins that trail behind me like shadows of the damned. I remember the night I lost everything. The chaos, the screams, and then the stillness, a silence so profound it swallowed me whole. I stood in the aftermath, surrounded by wreckage, my hands stained with more than just blood. I had waded into the depths of despair, and now the weight of that loss haunts me, a spectre that whispers of judgment and consequence. I had tried to atone, tried to bury my guilt beneath layers of prayer and penance, yet here I am, still tormented by the ghosts of my past. Is this pilgrimage even real? I ask, my voice raw with desperation. Is it just the facade we wear to mask our shame? Thomas stares at the ground, the corners of his mouth twitching with the hint of a smile. Maybe we're just actors in a play, wearing masks to hide our true faces. Or maybe, he adds, his voice dropping to a whisper, we're just hoping for forgiveness from a God who's long since turned his back. The cathedral looms closer now, its doors gaping open like the maw of a beast, ready to swallow us whole. I can hear the murmur of the congregation inside, a symphony of remorse and desperation, echoing against the stone walls. I glance at the woman still kneeling, her head bowed deep in prayer, and I wonder, what does she see behind her closed eyelids? Does she find peace, or is she just as lost as we are? The realization hits me like a cold gust of wind. Every soul here is bound by something, whether it's guilt, regret, or an unquenchable thirst for redemption. This pilgrimage isn't a path to salvation, it's a masquerade of souls, all of us wearing our sins like badges of honor, hoping to find absolution in the embrace of hollow rituals. As we step inside the cathedral, the atmosphere shifts, heavy with unspoken confessions and the weight of our collective guilt. The shadows stretch and yawn, swallowing the flickering candlelight. I stand before the altar, an altar that has borne witness to countless prayers, cries for forgiveness that hang in the air like smoke. I feel the heat of 1,000 eyes digging into my back, judging, dissecting, churning my insides with every fleeting thought. Do you ever wonder how far we can run from our past? I ask Thomas, the question falling from my lips like a prayer itself. He shakes his head, a sad smile creeping over his lips. I don't think we can run far enough. It's like chasing smoke. Every time you think you have it, it slips through your fingers. I shudder, the truth of his words sinking in like shards of glass. The burden of guilt isn't just a weight, it's a living thing, crawling inside us, festering in the crevices of our minds. It mocks us, reminding us of the choices we made, the paths we chose, and the ones we left behind. The congregation begins to hum a hymn, a haunting melody that weaves through the air, stitching together the seams of our broken hearts. I close my eyes, allowing the sound to wrap around me, but even as the notes envelop my spirit, the ghosts of my past surge forward, clawing at my sanity. I remember the faces, their eyes wide with fear, their cries echoing in my ear. Time bends and warps, stretching as I stand there, caught between the weight of my guilt and the hope of forgiveness. The boundaries of reality blur, and suddenly, I'm no longer in the cathedral but standing at the edge of the abyss, looking into the dark waters that threaten to drown me. I can taste the bitterness of regret on my tongue, an acrid reminder of all the choices I can never take back. And in that moment, I realize, this isn't just a pilgrimage for penance, it's a reckoning. The past and present collide, and I feel it in my bones, the knowledge that the only way to truly seek redemption is to confront the very sins that brought me here. I turn to Thomas, the urgency in my heart pounding like a war drum. We can't keep hiding, I say, the words spilling from my lips in a rush. We have to face our ghosts. His eyes widen, and for a moment, I see the flicker of fear, a reflection of my own uncertainty. But then he nods, and I can feel the resolve solidifying between us like an unbreakable bond. The hymn swells, and as I listen, I know there's no escaping the weight of our sins, but perhaps, just perhaps, the act of confronting them can free us from their grasp. The cathedral stands like a testament to our struggles, a reminder that even in darkness, we must seek the light. I take a breath, the air thick with possibility and dread, and as we step back into the flickering shadows, the echoes of the past chase after us, whispering secrets that demand to be heard. The journey is far from over, it has only just begun. The cacophony of voices buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, a chaotic orchestra of anticipation, prayers, and desperation. I stood at the precipice of a mass of bodies, a living, breathing creature of flesh and fervor, and I felt it pulse around me, an electric current of belief and fear. People surged, swaying and stumbling, each face a mask of longing, anxiety etched into their features. I could hardly breathe, the scent of sweat and incense curled in the air, a thick fog of devotion and disorder. "Hold on tight," shouted a voice, barely audible above the din, a warning that felt both protective and futile. I could barely hear my own thoughts, lost in the tide of pilgrims, all of us united by a singular desire that felt almost savage. Beside me was Maria, her gaze darting, frantic. She was searching, always searching. Her hand clenched the strap of her bag like a lifeline, her knuckles white. She had come to find solace, a miracle, but the crowd was an oppressive weight that threatened to crush her spirit. "I can't breathe," she gasped, turning to me, her eyes wide, shimmering with fear and fervor. "What if we lose each other?" "Just stay close," I replied, my voice a thin thread, fraying under the pressure. But as the crowd surged, I felt the grip of my own panic tighten around my chest. We were atoms in a chaotic universe, colliding and separating, drifting further from one another. I could almost feel the ground quaking beneath us, as if the earth itself knew the weight of our collective desperation. Then there was Raj, a man who wore his faith like a shield, yet beneath his sturdy exterior lay a heart that raced like a trapped bird. He had come seeking redemption, a chance to atone for sins he could barely articulate. He stood tall, shoulders squared, yet the tremor in his hands betrayed him. "This is where it happens," he said, almost to himself, his voice low and reverent. "This is where the divine touches the earth." But the divine had a twisted sense of humor. As we pushed further into the throng, I caught sight of a woman collapsing, her cry swallowed by the chaos. "Someone help!" A rush of bodies surged forward, a frenzied wave of hands and feet, and for a moment, I felt the impulse to reach out, to help. But the current swept me away, and I was helpless, a bystander to the chaos that unfolded, my own heart pounding in time with the panic around me. "Stay together!" I called out, but my voice was lost, echoing in a vast emptiness. Maria's hand slipped from mine, and in that instant, I felt the fabric of our connection tear. I turned, desperate, searching for her familiar face, but it was swallowed whole by the throng, an endless sea of limbs and desperation. "Maria!" I shouted, a raw edge of fear coloring my voice. I pushed forward, my heart racing, a relentless drum echoing in my ears. Faces flashed by, some hopeful, some twisted in despair, a kaleidoscope of human emotion. I felt the chaos tightening around me, a noose woven from faith and fear, strangling my resolve. Raj, caught in the current, stumbled beside me. "We can't lose her," he said, his voice a low growl, determination etched into his brow. But his eyes betrayed his own turmoil, a flicker of doubt that danced just beneath the surface. "She'll find her way back," I tried to convince us both, but the truth lay heavy in the air, thick as smoke. The crowd surged again, and I felt the press of bodies, hot breath against my neck. The tension was a taut string ready to snap, one wrong move, one moment of weakness, and it would all unravel. And yet, amidst the chaos, beneath the clamoring voices, I heard something deeper, a collective heartbeat, a primal rhythm that bound us together despite the fractures. I closed my eyes and breathed, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, the thrum of life. I remembered the nights I spent staring up at the stars, wondering if they were watching us, if they too felt the weight of our desires. I remembered the stories whispered to me as a child, tales of heroes and miracles, of redemption found in the darkest of places. But here, in this chaos, those stories felt like ghosts, haunting shadows that slipped through my fingers as the crowd pressed on. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the chaos erupted into silence. I opened my eyes. The air shifted. All around us, the bodies had stilled, a collective intake of breath as we faced the towering cathedral looming ahead, its spires piercing the sky like fingers reaching for the heavens. It was both a sanctuary and a prison, a promise of salvation and a reminder of our own frailty. "Look!" Raj shouted, his voice breaking through the stillness, pointing toward the doors wide open, inviting yet daunting. "That's where we need to be." But even as hope flared within me, I felt the weight of the crowd shift, a restless energy swirling beneath the surface. Rage and reverence clashed, emotions boiling over. Someone cried out, "Let us in," and I could feel the wave of desperation cresting, about to break. I glanced at Raj, and I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the fear of failing. "What if it's all for nothing?" he whispered, and it felt like a knife to the gut. That question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, a spectre that danced just out of reach. The chaos was returning, a storm brewing on the horizon. I could feel it, thick and electric. And as the throng began to push forward once more, bodies colliding, breath mingling, I knew that the real pilgrimage was not just to the cathedral, but within ourselves. The chaos would be relentless, but so too would be our hope. A rustle in the underbrush, a snap of a twig, my heart hammers against my ribcage like a desperate prisoner. I stand frozen, breath caught in my throat, eyes wide. It's dusk, the sky bleeding colors, yet darkness creeps ever closer like an unwelcome shadow. I remember a time when nature felt like a friend. Now, it feels like a predator, hungry, relentless. Beside me, Clara's fingers tremble as she clutches her walking stick, knuckles white against the wood. She is fierce, a wildfire in a fragile body, but even her spirit falters as she scans our surroundings, breath shallow, eyes darting to the tree line. "Just a squirrel," she whispers, though the tremor in her voice betrays her bravado. We both know it's not. Nothing in this wilderness is as innocent as it seems. The leaves whisper secrets, and the shadows seem to linger longer, as if waiting for something to slip into the light. In the distance, the low growl of a bear sends a shiver racing down my spine. I remember my childhood, climbing trees, feeling invincible. I was the king of my kingdom, but now? Now, I'm just a fragile creature caught in the wild, vulnerable and trembling. Clara catches my eye, and in that shared glance, I see her fear mirrored in me. It's a haunting reflection, reminding me how fragile we are, how quickly the hunter can become the hunted. The night thickens, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I can almost hear time ticking away, seconds morphing into eternity. We move, step by careful step, through the wilderness, a dance with danger. It's not just the bears we fear. The pests are relentless, too, mosquitoes, buzzing like tiny demons, eager to feast on our flesh. I slap at my arms, the bites throbbing like tiny hearts, reminding me that danger lurks even in the smallest of creatures. There's a rustle behind us, and I whirl around, eyes wide, heart racing. What was that? I gasp, words sharp-edged with fear. Clara's breath hitches, and for a moment, we both forget everything else, the miles we've walked, the laughter we've shared. All that exists is the primal instinct to survive. "Just the wind," she says, but I see the doubt flicker across her eyes. The wind doesn't growl, doesn't shift the branches as if something is moving. It's the silence that screams, that gnaws at our sanity. I remember being out here last summer, the forest filled with the melodic calls of birds, the chirps of crickets. Now, there's only the suffocating silence, punctuated by the growl of a beast that might just consider us its next meal. A flash of movement, the dark, hulking. My heart races as I realize it's not just my imagination. A silhouette emerges, sleek and powerful. A coyote? A wolf? The lack of clarity sends a surge of panic through me. "Clara, we need to move," I breathe, words barely escaping my lips. She's glued to the spot, eyes fixed on the creature lurking just out of sight. The world narrows down to this single moment, the predator, the prey. I can feel the heat radiating from my skin, the sweat pooling at the nape of my neck. That's when I see it, the glint of yellow eyes staring back at us, a malevolent curiosity etched in its gaze. I remember, I whisper, a ghost of a memory flickering in my mind. I was always drawn to the wild, enchanted by its beauty. But beauty can turn grotesque in an instant. My thoughts race, a million scenarios play out, each more horrifying than the last. I can't help but think of the stories, the warnings of those who came before us, their eyes wide with terror as they recounted their close encounters with death. We're not safe here. The coyote, a ghostly figure now, slipping between trees, silent but not unseen, paints a portrait of dread. I feel Clara's hand grip my arm, tight enough to draw blood. "We need to find shelter," she says, her voice a low tremor that seems to echo in the night. The urgency in her tone is infectious, igniting a fire in my veins. I turn, scanning the landscape. Shadows dance around us, and the path we walked is swallowed by darkness. Memories tug at my mind, campfire stories, laughter echoing under the stars. How naive we were then, believing we were invincible, untouched by the wild's true nature. As we stumble forward, the air thickens, each breath a battle against the rising tide of fear. I can almost hear the whispers of the forest, the stories it holds, the secrets it keeps. Clara trips, falling to her knees. Go, she gasps, eyes wild. But I can't leave her. In this moment, we're bound, like stars caught in the same orbit, destined to burn bright or fade together. A sudden rustle to my left, too close, too real. I whirl around, heart in my throat, adrenaline surging. The coyote lunges, electric with hunger, teeth bared, and I can see the primal instinct in its eyes. I remember the stories, how the wild plays no favorites, how it devours the weak. But Clara? Clara is not weak. Get behind me! I shout, adrenaline coursing through me like wildfire. She hesitates, then moves, her trust in me an anchor amidst the storm. In that moment, everything else blurs, the forest, the shadows, the reality of our peril. All that exists is the coyote, and the instinct to protect. The coyote lunges again, but something primal stirs within me. I swing my walking stick, connecting with the creature's side. It yelps, a sound that echoes through the trees, and for a moment, I feel invincible, a warrior fighting for survival. But this is just the beginning. I remember a world where laughter echoed in the wild, where nature was a friend rather than a foe. But those memories are ghosts now, haunting me as I stand on the precipice of chaos. The coyote snarls, circling us, and I feel the gravity of our situation settle in. This is not just survival, this is a reckoning with the wild, an encounter that will change us forever. Clara's eyes blaze with determination, reflecting the fire we both need to survive. And in that moment, amidst shadows and danger, I realize the wilderness doesn't just test our strength, it reveals our souls. Every heartbeat echoes with the weight of the choices we make, the paths we take, and the ghosts that linger in the silence of the night. The world is vast, but here, in this moment, it narrows down to a single truth: we are alive, and we will fight for that life with every breath. But the night is long, and the wilderness? It is as unpredictable as our fate. The coyote retreats, but the threat lingers, a reminder that we are never truly alone in the dark. And as we stand, hearts pounding, caught between fear and survival, I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning of a story, one that will stretch into the depths of night and shadow, echoing long after this encounter fades. The air hung thick with the scent of desperation, a stifling fog that wrapped around the narrow streets of the town like a shroud. I stood at the edge of the square, my heart pounding like a war drum, the rhythm echoing in my ears as I watched the crowd gather. They were hushed, faces twisted into tight masks of hope and fear, their eyes gleaming like shards of glass under the late afternoon sun. A pilgrimage, an act of devotion, a journey towards the divine, but today, it felt like a funeral march. I remember the moment my mother's voice broke through the din. "We can't pay for this, not now," she whispered, her hands trembling as they clutched the worn fabric of her dress. I felt the weight of her gaze, a mix of pleading and resignation. The thought of us, a family on the brink, teetering between faith and financial ruin, twisted in my stomach. Pilgrimage, a sacred quest, was now a chain binding us, dragging us deeper into a chasm we could hardly fathom. My brother, Elias, stood beside her, his face pale. "But it's the only way," he insisted, his voice strained, each word a plea wrapped in desperation. "What if we find healing? What if it changes everything?" His dreams hung in the air like smoke, intangible yet suffocating. I could almost see them swirling around us, ethereal visions of a brighter future, but I could feel the ground beneath us cracking. The burden of money loomed larger than any divine promise. I remember the glint of a coin in my palm, a solitary piece of silver that would hardly buy us a loaf of bread. "What will it cost us?" I murmured, half to myself, half to the universe that seemed to conspire against us. It felt wrong to dream when the shadows of our debts loomed so close. The landlord's sneer, the butcher's pitying glance, all whispered of despair. Elias turned to me, desperation etched into the lines of his youthful face. "Do you remember father?" His voice trembled as he spoke the name like an incantation. He would have wanted us to go. There it was, the ghost of a man who had walked miles for a miracle but returned empty-handed. A pilgrimage of hope turned into a promise unfulfilled. I could feel the memory wrapping around my heart like a vice. I didn't need to remember, I lived it every day. And yet, in the depths of our conversation, faith flickered like a dying flame. I caught sight of a woman in the crowd, her hair wild, eyes wide with fervor. "I've sold my last cow," she cried out, voice rising above the murmurs, "to seek salvation for my child." The crowd surged forward, a swell of broken souls clawing toward a glimmer of salvation. The sheer desperation was visceral, a living thing that gnawed at my insides. I remembered my own dreams, hushed voices in the night that whispered of far-off places, of holy sites filled with the echoes of prayers. But each night, the realities of our dilapidated home stole those dreams away. I looked back at my mother, her shoulders hunched like a weary traveler, her dreams dulled by the weight of reality. The pilgrimage wasn't just a journey, it was a sacrifice, a costly venture that could mean choosing between faith and family. "Elias, we can't," I said, the words heavy in my throat, each syllable a stone dropped into a well of despair. "We can't sacrifice everything for a chance." But the look in his eyes was fierce, a tempest brewing in the stormy seas of his spirit. "What is everything?" he thundered, voice breaking into an emotional crescendo. "What if it means nothing?" The crowd surged again, pushed forward by collective hope, by the belief that the divine would intercede. A shiver ran down my spine as I felt the weight of their hopes pressing against me, a tide of expectation that threatened to drown me. I turned, the world around me blurring into a haze of color and sound, a chaotic tapestry woven with fear and fervor. The shadows lengthened, stretching toward us as the sun dipped below the horizon, a silent witness to our plight. I remember the silence that followed, the stillness that enveloped us like a shroud just after the storm. In that moment, I could hear Elias's breath, ragged and full of longing. "Would you abandon hope?" he asked, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "Would you leave our mother in this hollow existence?" I felt the sharp edge of guilt, the way it sliced through the fabric of my resolve. I closed my eyes, visions of our humble home, of my mother's quiet suffering, of Elias's fierce dreams swirling around me, pushing me toward a decision that felt monumental, yet terrifyingly inevitable. The air crackled with tension, electric and alive. This was more than a choice, it was a reckoning. I could feel the crowd's expectations, a collective heartbeat thrumming in time with mine, a desperate, shared pulse. The pilgrimage lay before us, a path lined with sacrifice, uncertainty, and perhaps salvation. And just as I thought I had made my decision, a voice echoed from the back, a voice that cut through the collective dream with chilling clarity. "What if we fail?" The question hung in the air, a ghost that threatened to swallow all hope. I turned, startled, to see a man standing tall, his face a mask of harsh reality. "What if we are left with nothing?" I felt my heart shatter, pieces of hope slicing into my skin as the truth settled around us like a cloak of darkness. Every heartbeat resonated with the weight of possibility, each breath thick with the tension of our choices. The cost of pilgrimage loomed large, and I was left gripping the frayed edges of hope, wondering if we would find ourselves on the other side, transformed or broken. As uncertainty swirled around us, I felt time stretch, the moments binding us together, creating a tapestry of decisions yet to be made. And as I stood there, caught in the web of emotion, I realized that our pilgrimage had already begun, not on the road, but in our hearts, where the battles raged silently, under the surface, waiting to erupt. The cost, the weight, was only just beginning. The room was thick with smoke, the air humming with whispered incantations and the flickering glow of candles fighting against the encroaching shadows. I stood frozen, my heart pounding like a war drum, each beat resonating with the urgency of the moment. My hands trembled, fingers brushing against the rough skin of the talisman I clutched, a sacred object passed down through generations, worn and frayed, but still imbued with the weight of belief. It felt like a promise, a lifeline thrown into the abyss of uncertainty. "Don't let it find you," Lydia hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a knife. She stood beside me, her eyes wide and haunted, reflecting the flickering candlelight. A single tear slid down her cheek, glistening like a jewel before it was swallowed by the darkness. You know what happens if you break it. I remembered the stories, the tales of those who dared to challenge the old ways, who'd scoffed at the warnings and relied on their own hubris to navigate the world. They never returned. Or if they did, they were never the same. I could still hear the voices of my childhood friends, reciting the nursery rhymes that dripped with dread: step on a crack, break your mother's back. Cross a black cat's path, and doom is your fate. Each line had been a game then, silly, inconsequential. But standing here, clutching the talisman, I felt their weight bearing down on me. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second stretching into eternity. It was a reminder that time was slipping away, that something ancient and predatory was stirring just beyond the veil, waiting to snatch us away. I could feel its eyes on me. The air grew colder, a reminder that belief had its own gravity, pulling me deeper into the abyss of superstition. Did you hear that? I asked, my voice cracking, betraying the fear pooling in my chest. The shadows seemed to thicken, twisting into grotesque shapes that danced along the walls. They whispered, taunted, their voices a dissonant chorus spinning webs of doubt in my mind. What if it's too late? Lydia's voice trembled, a fragile note that echoed through the chaos surrounding us. Her hands quivered as she clutched her own talisman, a delicate charm forged from bone and silver, a talisman of protection from the spirits that roamed the night. We should have never come here. We should have listened to my mother. But it was too late for regret, too late for caution. We were ensnared in the web of our own making, drawn to this dark ritual as moths to a flame. Each thread of superstition tightened around us, a noose woven from fear and desperation. I could feel my mind racing, recalling the stories of those who sought protection in the wrong places. The man who found solace in the charms of a charlatan, only to lose everything to the malevolent force he invited in. The woman who wore a necklace of garlic, convinced it would shield her from evil, but instead attracted it, turning love into a bitter spectre of loss. The flickering candlelight cast erratic shadows that danced and twisted, distorting reality, blurring the lines between the known and the unknown. Lydia stepped closer, her breath hot against my ear. You have to promise me, if it comes for us, if it takes me, promise you won't give in to the myths. Promise you'll fight. My throat tightened, the weight of her words sinking in like lead. The knowledge that I was tethered to her fate, that our destinies were entwined in this moment, sent a shiver down my spine. I could almost taste the bitterness of despair, the salt of our shared fears mingling in the air. I nodded, though the promise felt hollow, a mere echo against the cacophony of our impending doom. And then it came, a rush of wind, a cold breath that swept through the room, snuffing out the candles, plunging us into darkness. The shadows coalesced, morphed into a figure that loomed before us, wreathed in an ancient malice. I could feel my heart racing, each thump a reminder of our fragile humanity, our desperate clinging to life in the face of the unspeakable. Do you believe, it rasped, its voice like grinding bones, each word echoing in the cavern of my mind. Do you truly believe your charms can save you? I could feel Lydia tremble beside me, the heat of her body a tether to reality. But at that moment, I was lost, suspended between terror and the overwhelming urge to scream, to run, to break free from the chains of the past. Legends aren't meant to protect you, the figure hissed, advancing slowly, deliberately. They bind you, ensnare you in a cycle of fear. You think your charms will save you, but they only serve to remind you of your own fragility. I could see my breath crystallizing in the air, a ghostly reminder of our mortality, our insignificance in the grand tapestry of existence. The figure leaned closer, its eyes dark pools of void, and I felt my resolve crumbling. The talisman slipped from my fingers, clattering to the ground like a defeated soldier on the battlefield of despair. In that moment of surrender, the world around us shifted, a churning tide of fate and fear. The shadows grew bolder, whispering secrets that clawed at my sanity, lingering doubts that festered in the corners of my mind. Could these stories, these superstitions, be the very shackles that bound us to our fears? What if the legends were the true monsters, bending reality to their will, manipulating our lives with threads of terror? As I looked into Lydia's eyes, the flicker of faith extinguished, I realized I stood at the precipice of revelation. The weight of the talisman was replaced by the weight of truth. The true danger lay not in the darkness or the unknown, but in the myths we clung to, the fragile stories we constructed to shield ourselves from the chaos of existence. The figure loomed larger, its presence an echo of everything we had believed, and with one final, shattering breath, I understood. We were not merely players in this tale, we were the architects of our own fate, trapped in a narrative of our making. And with that understanding came a choice. In the eerie silence that followed, the shadows began to recede. The confrontation was not yet over, but I felt a flicker of defiance surge within me, a light that refused to be snuffed out. "What are you afraid of?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, but steady. "What if we choose to reject the fear?" The shadows writhed, uncertainty flickering in the darkened corners. Lydia squeezed my hand, her grip a lifeline back to hope. The battle was just beginning. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, a storm brewing within the silence, as we faced the remnants of our fears, ready to forge a new path from the ashes of our superstitions. And as the darkness fell away like the last vestiges of a nightmare, I could only wonder what came next. The candlelight flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced upon the cold stone walls of the cathedral. The air smelled of incense, mingling with the dampness that clung to every corner, a graveyard of secrets buried deep in the foundation. I remember the hushed whispers of desperate souls, their hopes hanging by a thread as they shuffled through the heavy wooden doors, each step echoing like the tolling of a distant bell, heavy, ominous, foreboding. In the midst of this sacred place, a throng of pilgrims gathered, faces etched with desperation and dreams. They came seeking solace, answers, or perhaps a touch of the divine. Among them was Eliza, a mother with wild, sunken eyes, clutching a tattered cloth tightly against her chest, her daughter's blanket, an offering to the gods who seemed, to her at least, to have forgotten her. She was a figure of heart-wrenching hope, wrapped in a shroud of despair, willing to trade everything for the flicker of a chance that her prayers might be heard. Across the nave, Father Benedict surveyed the sea of souls with a practiced smile, a blend of piety and predation. He was not just a man of God, he was a master puppeteer, pulling strings with the deftness of a seasoned manipulator. Every coin that clinked into the offering box was a whisper of victory, a testament to his power. The church, his church, was a business, and the pilgrims were the unwitting customers, lured by promises of salvation, while the shadows of avarice loomed larger than any altar's light. I can still hear the soft rustle of coins, metallic and sharp, like the ticking of a clock counting down their last moments of innocence. Each donation was a bargain made, a soul bartered in the marketplace of faith, where the currency was guilt and the exchange rate set by the church's insatiable hunger. Eliza leaned closer to the altar, her heart hammering like a war drum, and I felt the weight of her faith, a beautiful burden, yet a burden nonetheless. But then, a tremor of doubt. It was in the way Father Benedict's gaze lingered on the offerings, how he caressed the gilded edges of the collection plate as if it were the very heart of the divine. The Lord provides, he preached, but he asks for sacrifices in return. And I couldn't help but wonder, who was truly sacrificing? The mother on her knees, praying fervently for a miracle, or the priest, who smiled as he counted the spoils of their devotion? The cathedral was a labyrinth of hope and hollow promises, twisting and turning like Eliza's thoughts. She had come seeking God, but all she found were shadows. The echoes of her prayers faded into the silence, drowned beneath the weight of wealth and greed. "I remember," she whispered to herself, "I remember when faith felt light, when it danced like sunlight on water, not like this heavy shroud." Outside, the wind howled, a mournful wail that slipped through the cracks, carrying with it memories of the past, of the countless souls who had tread the same path, some victorious, some doomed. The church had grown rich on their suffering, their longing. Father Benedict's robes glimmered in the candlelight, a stark contrast to the ragged garments of those who knelt before him, their faith a currency far too easily devalued. In the shadows of the nave, a figure quivered. It was Thomas, a young man with eyes like storm clouds, filled with rage and confusion. He had once been a believer, a fervent disciple, but the church's insatiable greed had corrupted his spirit. He watched as his mother, once a proud woman, now shrank under the weight of her faith, battered and broken, a mere husk of who she used to be. What have we become? He whispered, a question tossed into the void where answers went to die. I felt his anger pulsing through the very stones of the church, a heartbeat drumming against the silence. He stepped forward, fists clenched, trembling with an energy that could either ignite or destroy. You line your pockets with our desperation, Father, he shouted, his voice reverberating through the hallowed hall, the message sharp as a blade. We are not your sheep to shear. We are not your gold. The congregation turned, startled, eyes wide with a mix of fear and intrigue. Eliza flinched, instinctively pulling tighter around her daughter's blanket. The confrontation had descended like a thunderstorm, heavy and electric with the promise of destruction. Father Benedict's smile faltered, and for the first time, a shadow of an honest emotion crossed his features, fear. Leave this place, boy, he commanded, but his voice trembled, revealing a crack in the facade he had so carefully constructed. You do not understand the ways of the Lord. Do you? Thomas shot back, his voice rising, raw and fierce. Or is it just the weight of our coins that fills your pockets and our hearts with despair? The air crackled with tension, a live wire of energy surging between them, igniting the embers of rebellion. The other pilgrims shifted uneasily, caught in a web of conflicting emotions. Each heartbeat was a question, were they here for salvation or subjugation? Eliza's voice broke through the impending chaos, fragile yet resolute. We came for hope, Father. Not to be sold into despair. We are more than mere offerings. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, and in that moment, a bond formed, a fragile yet undeniable alliance forged in shared suffering. In this cathedral of contradictions, sacred yet corrupt, a confrontation loomed on the horizon, dark and inevitable. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths and fractured dreams. Who would emerge unscathed? Would faith survive the storm, or would it crumble beneath the weight of its own greed? I remember the flickering candlelight, the shadows that danced upon the stone. A spark had ignited, but in the heart of the church, it was hard to tell if it would be a flame of redemption or an inferno of ruin. Rain pounded the dirt path, forming muddy rivers that snaked around the worn sandals of the pilgrims. The air crackled with tension, thick and pregnant with anticipation. I stood among them, breathless, heart hammering against my ribcage like a prisoner desperate for freedom. This was no ordinary pilgrimage, it was a testament to the very essence of suffering, a brutal trial where redemption was promised but rarely delivered. Each face I glanced at told a story, shadows swimming in their eyes. Marisol, her eyes glistening like wet stones, stumbled beside me. She was searching for something, a lost child, a forgotten love, a reason to believe. Her once vibrant laughter had dulled, replaced by a silence that screamed louder than the thunder overhead. I remembered her smile, it had a warmth that could melt the frost off the cruelest winter day. Now, it lay buried beneath the weight of her grief. I thought I could find him here, she gasped, her voice cracking like an old bell. I thought I could leave my pain behind. But wasn't that the lie we all clung to, standing shoulder to shoulder in this suffocating storm? I shot a glance at Ethan, his knuckles white as he gripped the wooden staff that had become his lifeline. A grown man reduced to a trembling boy, chasing the spectre of salvation through mud and misery. I remembered the glint in his eyes when he first spoke of this pilgrimage, how he painted images of light and redemption, how he wove tales that danced between hope and despair. Now, those tales lay scattered like broken glass on the ground, sharp, dangerous, cutting deep. A flash of lightning sliced through the darkened sky, illuminating the path ahead, a fleeting glimpse of what lay beyond the storm. I could feel the earth tremble beneath us, echoing the unrest in our hearts. I wanted to scream, to shake Ethan and demand the truth. What did you think you would find here? I wanted to scream. But the words stuck in my throat, tangled up in the chaos of my own doubts. Marisol, Ethan, I whispered fiercely. What if this is all a lie? What if redemption is just a mirage, a trick of the light that lures us deeper into despair? My own voice surprised me, it was raw, a growing crack in the facade I wore like armor. Ethan turned, eyes wide, like a child caught in a storm. You can't mean that, he breathed, panic creeping into his tone. We're doing this to be free, to shed our burdens. This is our chance. but even his conviction faltered, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through the bravado he clung to. I could see it, the fear wrapped around him, binding him as tightly as the leather straps of his sandals. We pressed on through the torrent, each step a reminder of the weight we carried. I watched Marisol, her face a mask of sorrow, the rain mingling with the tears that traced paths down her cheeks. "I lost my son," she murmured, more to herself than to us. "I thought if I prayed hard enough, if I sacrificed enough, I could bring him back. I could be whole again." Her words hung in the air, a haunting echo that drew us into a deeper darkness. The truth was a beast, gnashing its teeth in the shadows, waiting to pounce. I could almost hear it, snarling at our dreams, our hopes turned to ash. With each step, the shadows grew longer, stretching out to envelop us like a shroud. I glanced back at our companions, weary souls with hollow eyes and fading resolve, lost in their own worlds of pain. Some whispered prayers, others cursed the storm, but all were bound by an invisible thread woven of suffering and desperation. Did they think the stone beneath their feet would lead them to enlightenment? Or that the rain would wash away their sins? I felt my own doubts coil around me like a serpent, choking out the light. What if we are just deluding ourselves? I said again, my voice now a plea. What if we're not meant to be redeemed? Marisol's hand brushed against mine, a fleeting moment of connection in the chaos. Then we fight for it, she whispered fiercely, a spark lighting her eyes. We fight for the chance to believe. And there it was, the truth wrapped in a question, a glimmer of defiance against the suffocating weight of despair. But just as quickly, it flickered and faded, leaving me grappling with the darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. Thunder rumbled like the growl of a feral beast, and the rain intensified, lashing against our skin like sharp needles. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, a reminder of the instability that lay ahead. In this moment, we were stripped raw, our vulnerabilities laid bare. The path stretched before us, shrouded in shadows, and the promise of redemption felt like a cruel joke. What was redemption, really? A word tossed around like a leaf in the wind, beautiful yet hollow. With each step forward, the idea shattered further, splintering into 1,000 fragments that cut deep into our hearts. What if we reached the end of this pilgrimage, only to find that the solace we sought was nothing more than a mirage dancing on the horizon? I glanced at Ethan, trembling, his dreams unraveling with every heartbeat. "You wanted to find God," I said, the words heavy with unasked questions. "But what if God is in the silence, in the struggle, in the pain we bear? What if He's not waiting for us at the end of this road, but walks alongside us in the storm?" For a moment, the rain ceased. The world fell into an eerie silence, and I could almost hear the deep beating of our hearts, echoing against the landscape. The weight of uncertainty loomed like a dark cloud, and yet, in that breath of stillness, I felt a flicker of connection. A shared understanding. Then the storm roared back to life, and I could see it in their eyes, the fear, the doubt. The question loomed larger than any we had faced. Was this pilgrimage truly worth the pain? Would any answer we found be enough to quiet the ghosts that haunted us? Marisol was shaking now, and I could sense Ethan faltering. We were drowning in the depths of our own struggles, the promise of redemption a cruel taunt. The path ahead was muddied and treacherous, and the shadows of our past loomed larger than any storm, a darkness threatening to engulf us whole. As I took another step, the ground shook beneath us, and I could feel the world tilt, teetering on the edge of chaos. The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. What if this was just the beginning, a dark chapter in a story that had no end? The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement as I stumbled through the city's familiar streets, the weight of my pilgrimage still clinging to me like a stubborn fog. The air was thick with the smell of fried food and gasoline, a stark contrast to the cedar wood and sacred incense that filled my lungs just days ago. I could hear laughter, a sharp, jarring sound echoing from a nearby cafe, where friends gathered, sipping coffee, their smiles bright and unburdened. Yet here I was, feet dragging, heart heavy, as if each step pulled me deeper into a chasm of despair. I blinked against the sunlight, but the brightness only amplified the darkness within me. I remember the chants from the mountain, the rhythmic beating of drums that resonated with my very soul, the communion with the divine that seemed to rip apart the fabric of the mundane. Now, those sacred echoes were replaced by mundane conversations, the drone of life going on without me. Across the street stood Clara, her hair a wild halo against the harshness of the urban landscape. I hadn't seen her since the pilgrimage, since we had shared that heart-stopping moment at the summit where the world seemed to tilt, where we thought we could touch the heavens. But now, her eyes were clouded. I could see it, the way she fidgeted with her bracelet, the anxious bite of her lip. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that I felt it too, the disconnect, the haunting echoes of our spiritual journey lingering like unwanted guests. But the words caught in my throat, heavy and suffocating. Clara! I finally managed, my voice a strained whisper. She turned, and for a moment, her expression flickered, recognition, then hesitation. I saw it in her eyes, the questioning, the search for the old friendship that now felt like a ghost haunting the corridors of our memories. "How are you?" "Fine," she replied, a tight smile on her lips. But the lie hung between us, fragile yet suffocating. I remember the feel of the cool wind on my skin as we climbed together, the way it stripped away our fears, our insecurities, revealing the raw and trembling souls beneath. But here, in this concrete jungle, those moments felt like a distant dream, a dream that shattered into a million pieces. I wanted to scream, to pull her back into that transcendence, but words were a paltry currency in this new reality. "Do you feel different?" I asked, knowing the answer, dreading it as much as I craved it. The truth was a beast, lurking beneath the surface of our lives, waiting for the right moment to pounce. She looked away, her gaze drifting to the bustling street, where life continued unabated. "I don't know. It's like it never happened. Like I'm just pretending. I remember." I whispered, feeling the warmth of shared experience slip through my fingers like sand. "We stood before the altar, Clara. We felt something real. How can we just go back?" Her eyes glistened, and in that moment, I was reminded of the sweat trickling down our backs, the exhaustion that had morphed into exhilaration. We had shared something sacred, something that resonated beyond the confines of the physical world. But here, back in this city, the only altar was the one of normalcy, and it demanded our sacrifices without a hint of reverence. "Normalcy is a lie," I said, more to myself than to her, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I can't pretend not to feel it, the weight of the world pressing down on me, the ghosts of our experience haunting my every step." A flicker of understanding passed between us, a strobe light in the darkness, illuminating the isolation we both felt. But before we could grasp it fully, the moment dissolved. A horn blared, a couple brushed past us, their laughter ringing hollow in my ears. Clara's smile faded, and she turned away, swallowed up by the chaos of the city, leaving me standing there, alone. I remember the night at the monastery, how we had gathered under the stars, sharing our hopes and fears. The cosmos had felt close enough to touch then, the infinite possibilities swirling above our heads like a kaleidoscope of dreams. Now, the stars were obscured by smog, their brilliance muted, and I felt as if I was walking through a monochrome world, colored only by shadows of what had been. Days turned into an endless loop of meetings, coffee breaks, and small talk. I felt like an actor who had forgotten their lines, pretending to fit into the roles expected of me. My boss droned on about quarterly reports, but all I could think about was the sound of the river cascading down the rocks, a melody of freedom that felt light years away. I could still hear the laughter of fellow pilgrims, the raw joy that had seeped into the marrow of our bones. I remember the moment Clara had slipped her hand into mine at the peak, steady and certain. Now, that touch felt like a fading echo, a memory I clung to in desperation. I wanted to reach out to her, to find that connection again, but the chasm of our everyday lives loomed large between us, a rift that felt insurmountable. "Hey," a voice pulled me from my thoughts. It was Ethan, a fellow colleague, his expression shifting between concern and confusion. "You okay? You seem distracted." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. "Just tired." He nodded, but his eyes were sharp, searching. "You sure? You were different before. Something's off. Something's off." The phrase echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the fragility of our existence. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Everything was off. The world felt distorted, twisted, unrecognizable. But instead, I nodded, the weight of unspoken truths weighing heavy on my chest. As night fell, I stood on my balcony, the city lights flickering like stars caught in an artificial net. The shadows loomed larger, whispering promises of a return to what once was, yet the thought felt like a betrayal. I had tasted connection, had felt the pulse of the universe coursing through me. I remember. How could I go back to the mundane? The clock ticked mercilessly, each second a reminder of the time lost and the future that felt uncertain. I closed my eyes, hoping that when I opened them, I would find myself back on that sacred mountain, the weight of the world lifted, the air fresh and full of hope. But when I opened them, I was still here, and the shadows deepened, echoing with the laughter of ghosts. Tomorrow would come. I would wake, and the city would pulse with its relentless rhythm. The laughter would continue, the cars would honk, and life would unfold in its predictably chaotic manner. But inside me, a storm brewed, a longing for the sacred moments that slipped between my fingers like water. I was caught in the in-between, suspended between the echoes of the past and the demands of a future that felt impossibly distant, the weight of it all crushing me, yet invigorating me, reminding me of the life I once knew. And I remember. A distant scream echoes through the narrow valley, slicing the still air like a knife. It's a sound that shatters the silence, deep and raw, reverberating through the bones of the earth, an anguished cry that speaks of hope turned to despair. I stand frozen, heart pounding, as the sun dips behind the jagged peaks, casting shadows that twist and writhe like ghosts. I remember Marisol's eyes, bright with dreams, a fierce glimmer of defiance. "We'll find it," she said, gripping my arm tightly, her fingers digging into my flesh. The shrine of San Felipe. Just a few more days. I remember the warmth in her voice and how, in that moment, it felt like the world outside our small village receded, leaving only the strength of her belief. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, whispering promises of redemption. But that was before. Before we lost Jorge. He was our anchor, a giant of a man with laughter like thunder. I remember how he'd lift us both, spinning us in circles until we begged him to stop, breathless with joy. He had a map, scrawled on parchment that smelled of smoke and adventure. "It'll be worth it," he assured us, eyes glinting with mischief. But Jorge didn't return from the river where he'd gone to fetch water. The river devoured him, took him as if he were nothing more than a fleeting thought. Now, our goal feels like a cruel joke. The road ahead is riddled with stones and memories, the weight of our failure pressing down like an iron shackle around my chest. The shadows grow taller, night creeping in like a thief, stealing our resolve. Marisol, once vibrant, now trudges beside me, her spirit waning with each step. "We should turn back," she whispers, voice barely more than a breath. It's too late. I can't bear to look at her, the image of hope I've clung to for so long, unraveling like threads from an old tapestry. I push forward, the ache in my legs a muted echo of the ache in my heart. I remember the promises we made under the stars, our laughter mingling with the night. "We'll cleanse our sins, wash away our burdens," Jorge declared. It's a pilgrimage, for God and for us. But what of God now? The darkness seems to smirk, a mocking presence in the growing night. I recall the way the villagers looked at us when we left, their eyes filled with pity and silent warnings. "They won't make it," they said, shaking their heads, words like stones cast into a pond, ripples of doubt spreading wide. I clutch the amulet around my neck, a last gift from Jorge, the metal cool against my skin. Its weight reminds me of my own stubbornness, a flame flickering against the suffocating shadows. I won't accept this fate. I can't. I refuse to let Jorge's laughter dissolve into the silence. But Marisol falters, her breath hitching in her throat, eyes glassy as she gazes into the darkness. "I can't do this anymore," she pleads, desperation clawing at her words. "What if the shrine is just a story? What if we are only chasing ghosts?" Her voice cuts deeper than any blade. I want to scream, to shake her, to bring back the fire that once burned in her cheeks. Instead, I nod, though inside, I scream. I can't let her fall into that abyss. Just a little longer, I say, though I know the lie tastes bitter on my tongue. In the distance, a flicker of light dances on the horizon, as if beckoning us closer, luring us into its embrace. Look, I say, my voice wavering, we have to move. But my words hang in the air, heavy and frail like cobwebs. Marisol hesitates but ultimately follows. Each footfall sends tremors through the ground beneath us, echoes of our shared panic. I can't shake the feeling that something watches us from the shadows, eyes hidden, breath bated. The wind carries whispers, secrets I can't decipher. Time warps around us, the universe spinning with a cruel sense of irony. Night stretches long, the moon a mocking witness in the sky, illuminating the path we tread with its cold, indifferent glow. I catch sight of a figure just off the trail, a silhouette wrapped in shadows, and my heart races. Did you see that? Marisol's eyes widen, fear painting her features. What if it's a ghost, she whispers, dread spilling from her lips. It's nothing, I say, but the tremor in my voice betrays me. Every instinct screams to flee, to abandon this cursed path. But the light flickers again, no longer a distant promise, but a beckoning lure. It feels wrong, so intoxicatingly wrong. A sound, a soft, deceitful chuckle, emerges from the void, wrapping around us like a cloak. I look at Marisol, and for a brief second, I see something break in her. Something vital. We should go back, she pleads again, and I can feel the shattering of her spirit, the final thread unraveling. But I don't want to go back. I can't bear the thought of returning empty-handed, of facing the villagers' pity again. I want to believe in the shrine, in the promises we made. I can even hear Jorge's laughter, echoing across the chasm of our memories, urging me forward. Every heartbeat drums with urgency, the air thick with tension. I reach for Marisol, gripping her wrist. We're almost there, I whisper, though the words taste like ash. We stumble toward the light, a moth drawn into the flame, oblivious to the danger that lurks. Shadows churn around us, dark tendrils reaching, grasping. I can feel them pull at my mind, whispering doubts, taunting truths. And then, in a heart-stopping instant, we reach the source of the light. A clearing opens before us, but no shrine stands in sight. Instead, a figure looms, cloaked in darkness, eyes gleaming with malevolent delight. Welcome, it hisses, voice like sandpaper scraping over stone. The air thickens with dread. Marisol gasps, and I feel her grip slip from my hand. I turn, and she stands frozen, caught between the shadows and the nightmare, and in that moment, I understand, this is the end of our pilgrimage, not toward salvation, but into the void. The light fades, the laughter dies, and we stand on the precipice of despair, never reaching our destination, never returning whole. My heart races, but instead of fear, all I feel is a numbing sorrow. I reach out, but shadows close in around us, and the scream from the valley echoes again, this time mingling with a new sound, the haunting lament of dreams dashed against the rocks of reality. We are lost, forever entrapped in the darkness, and I know that pilgrimage failures are not just about the roads we take, but the pieces of ourselves we leave behind. The road stretches before them, a serpent writhing through the silent darkness, illuminated by the ghostly glow of the moon. Shadows twist and dance, wrapping around the weary travelers like a shroud. The air hangs thick with the scent of damp earth, mingling with the metallic tang of fear. In the heart of this foreboding landscape, three souls march forward, each step a testament to hope, faith, and desperation. I remember the clatter of hooves on cobblestone, the clinking of metal, echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness. Agnes, burdened with a weight that seemed to crush her spirit, clutched her rosary so tightly that her knuckles blanched, a silent prayer escaping her lips like a fragile bird taking flight. "We must keep moving," she whispered, her voice a mere flicker in the vast darkness, for him. But in the depths of her heart, doubt festered, a serpent hissing in the shadows, gnawing at her resolve. What if this journey was for naught? What if the divine remained deaf to her pleas? Beside her, Thomas, a man torn between the devout and the debauched, pressed forward, his breaths heavy with the weight of regret. "I remember the tavern," he muttered, a ghostly smile creeping onto his lips, half nostalgia, half sorrow. The laughter, the ale, the fleeting warmth of a woman's touch. I've traded it all for the hope of salvation. Yet salvation felt like a distant star, shimmering just beyond reach, an illusion dancing on the horizon, just like the flickering shadows that taunted him with every step. And then there was Eloan, her spirit a tempest, raging against the constraints of her world. They say we must suffer to find grace, she spat, her eyes ablaze, but what grace is there in pain? What good is faith when it chains us to misery? The words broke free from her lips, raw and jagged, her anger a wildfire consuming all that was familiar. Each step she took was a rebellion, a defiance against the invisible chains that bound her to a life she never chose. She yearned for freedom, but the road offered only uncertainty, a promise veiled in darkness. Thunder rumbled in the distance, an ominous warning that sent a shiver coursing through their veins. The trio stumbled upon an ancient church, its silhouette looming like a spectre against the night sky. The doors creaked open, revealing a sanctuary soaked in shadows, a place where faith whispered through the cracks of crumbling stone. The scent of incense was thick, suffocating, mingling with the dampness of the air, a reminder of sins long confessed and burdens carried. Inside, the flickering candlelight cast eerie shapes on the walls, the light and shadows dancing a macabre waltz. Agnes knelt before the altar, the wood cold beneath her knees, her heart pounding in rhythm with the echoes of prayers long forgotten. "Lord, I am lost," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Guide me." But as the words left her lips, she felt the emptiness of the sanctuary envelop her, a void that mocked her vulnerability, a reminder that faith can be a cruel mistress. Thomas lingered at the entrance, his gaze drawn to the flickering light. "What if it's all a lie?" he murmured, the doubt gnawing at his insides. "What if we're just chasing shadows?" A part of him craved the truth, the raw, unvarnished truth that could shatter his illusions. Yet, the fear of what lay beyond that truth paralyzed him, leaving him teetering on the precipice of faith and despair. Eloan, restless, paced beneath the vaulted ceiling, her anger igniting the air around her. "This place is a cage," she declared, her voice rising, a battle cry against a world that sought to silence her. "They preach suffering as virtue, yet all I see are ghosts shackled to their own despair." The shadows flickered, as if in agreement, twisting and curling around her like an embrace she couldn't accept. She longed to break free, but each flicker of the candlelight seemed to mock her, whispering tales of submission. Suddenly, a gust of wind surged through the open doors, extinguishing the flickering candles, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged, choking the air as they stumbled against one another, hearts racing wildly, breaths merging in a cacophony of fear. In that moment, the fragile web of faith they clung to frayed, unraveling in the face of the unknown. "I can't do this," Agnes gasped, her voice trembling, fear washing over her like a torrent. "What if we are forsaken?" The shadows loomed closer, wrapping around her, and she felt the chill of despair seep into her bones. But Thomas stepped forward, his resolve hardening like steel. "We must face it," he said, his voice steady now, echoing off the stone walls, a beacon of light against the encroaching darkness. "If we're to find him, we must confront our fears. Embrace our doubts." And in that moment, he found himself, not in the laughter of the tavern or the warmth of a woman's touch, but in the vulnerability of faith, raw, unfiltered, and terrifying. Eloan, too, felt the tension shift. "I refuse to be silenced," she declared, her anger morphing into something deeper, something more profound. "Our pain is not our prison, but our testimony." The shadows pulsed, as if responding to her defiance, each flicker of darkness an echo of the struggles faced by countless pilgrims who had walked these paths before. And so, in that haunted church, amidst whispers of doubt and flickering shadows, the three souls forged their own understanding of faith, molded by the stark realities of their journeys. They realized then that travel was more than a physical path, it was the pilgrimage of the heart, a relentless quest for meaning in a world steeped in suffering. The weight of their experiences, the burdens they carried, became a shared tapestry woven with strands of humanity and vulnerability, a haunting reminder that the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty but also potential. As the night deepened, they found a strange comfort in their shared struggles, an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of doubt and despair. And as they stepped back into the night, the road ahead loomed vast and ominous, a chasm filled with both fear and promise, each step echoing their resolve to confront the shadows of their souls. Their journey was far from over, it had only just begun. The rain pelted down like a relentless drum, turning the dirt path into a morass of mud and despair. I stood there, heart racing, as the heavy scent of wet earth mingled with the metallic tang of fear, my breath coming in ragged bursts. My cloak, torn and sodden, clung to my skin, and every shiver felt like a whisper of the ghosts who once trudged this very road, their hopes and faith trailing behind them like the mist that swirled around our feet. 3 figures huddled close to me, each one a reflection of my own internal struggles, yet distinct in their burdens. There was Eliana, her dark hair plastered to her forehead, eyes wide with an unquenchable thirst for redemption. She had left behind a life of expectations, a family that suffocated her dreams. In her gaze, I saw the flicker of a lost child, forever searching for a mother's caress in the dark folds of this unforgiving landscape. I remember, she whispered, voice trembling, the warmth of the sun on my back before I stepped into this abyss. Next to her stood Gaius, a man marked by the scars of his past, each one a testament to the choices he wished he could unmake. His laughter was a hollow echo, a mask worn to hide the grief that gnawed at his insides like a ravenous beast. I remember, he said bitterly, the nights spent in taverns, drowning my sorrows in ale and forgetting how to feel. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, he could no longer escape. The weight of his failure hung thick in the air, palpable, as if the heavens themselves conspired against him. And then there was me, lost in the tapestry of their pain, a weaver of my own regrets. I had journeyed through the corridors of time, an obsessive student of history, only to find that the lessons I sought often fled like shadows at dusk. I remember, I murmured, the faces of those who walked before us, their dreams woven into the fabric of this road, a patchwork of hope, heartbreak, and the grotesque absurdity of existence. Each word, a heartbeat, echoing against the silence of the night. Thunder rumbled overhead, a portent of the storms that raged within us. We were pilgrims, yes, but also lost souls, searching for something more profound than the destinations on our maps. Each step we took felt like a ghostly echo of journeys long past, faint whispers of those who had faced trials that would break the strongest of wills. As the rain poured harder, I watched Eliana's desperation morph into determination. She stepped forward, mud splattering against her legs, her spirit ignited by a fire that refused to be extinguished. "We can't stop now," she cried, and in her voice was the raw essence of every woman who had dared to defy the chains of her fate. "Every step is closer to the absolution I crave." Her words surged through the air, laced with a fierce urgency that made my heart pound in rhythm with her resolve. Gaius faltered, his eyes clouded with doubt. "But what if we falter? What if this path leads us to nothing but despair?" His voice trembled, a man caught between the chasm of hope and the suffocating grip of fear. The shadows cast by the flickering lantern light danced mockingly around us, and for a moment, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the countless souls who had walked away from everything, only to find themselves lost in the darkness. But Eliana would not be silenced. "Then we fall together," she shouted, voice rising above the cacophony of the storm. "But at least we dared to live, to fight for something more." Her words hung in the air like a spell, a spark igniting the kindling of our hearts. I felt it then, the tremor of something awakening within me. I had spent so long obsessed with the past, but this moment, the raw intensity of it, was an echo of every pilgrimage that ever was. The footsteps of those medieval souls, cloaked in the mists of time, resonated within me. They had braved the elements, faced their demons, and forged forward into the unknown. I remember, I whispered again, their struggles, the way they held on to faith when all seemed lost. The night grew darker, the rain a relentless torrent, but we pressed on. Our steps became a symphony of defiance, a chorus of our fears, hopes, and unyielding spirits. Each squelch of mud underfoot, each gust of wind that whipped against our skin, became a reminder of the struggle that is life itself. We marched toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn threatened to break through the storm clouds. The air was charged with a palpable energy, a sense that something momentous was about to unfold. But what awaited us? Redemption? Ruin? The landscape shifted beneath our feet, an ever-changing tapestry that mirrored our tumultuous hearts. I could almost hear the echoes of those who had come before us, their laughter mingling with our own, a haunting reminder that, despite the pain, life was a celebration of existence. In that moment, I realized that the lessons were not simply found in the arrival, but in the struggle itself. The pilgrimage was a microcosm of life, a reminder of our impermanence, our resilience, our relentless pursuit of meaning in a world that often teeters on the brink of chaos. A whisper echoed in my mind, "The journey is the destination." And as we pressed forward, I felt the weight of their struggles blending with my own, forming an intricate tapestry of shared humanity. Each footfall resonated with the wisdom of the ages, urging us to remember, to feel, to embrace the absurdity of it all. The storm howled, and we were but 3 souls against its fury, yet in that moment, we were alive. Our hearts beat as one against the tempest, each pulse a testament to the beauty of our shared struggle, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. And as dawn approached, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this was just the beginning. The lessons from the journey whispered through the wind, a reminder that we carry the weight of the past, but it does not define us. We are the sum of our struggles, our victories, our relentless pursuit of something greater. The path stretched before us, winding endlessly into the horizon, and all I could do was take another step, heart racing, breath heavy with anticipation, as the journey unfolded endlessly before us.